Well, hello there. Hello there, myth heads and Song of Ice and Fire fans. This here is your host. Uh, Here is your host, Shelly. I'm Shelly, the Squisher Maiden, and obviously I'm a lovely. I'm Shelly, the Squisher Maiden. I'm a mermaid, as what they call. Thank you for being with us, and if anybody would like to send in a super chat, I will come to your house and give you a big wet fish a kiss. Okay. I'm sorry. I won't pull your leg the whole time. This is, of course, Nimble Dick. I'm not no goddamn Squisher Maiden. Y'all know that. Where's my hat? There we go. All right. Thanks for bearing with my tomfoolery and shenanigans, but I do have two great guests who are also in costume on the stream, so say hello. We've got Timothée Shadow Bay, I believe his name is, and are you Rogue from the X-Men? Hello. Say hello, my guests.
Hi, everyone. Happy Halloween weekend.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Hi, I'm Nettles. I am pretty much every character who's ever had a streak. I'm my headcanon for Nettles, which is like the first time she takes a dragon ride, she gets like a streak of silver hair. Because we know canon, Nettles has dark hair. But I'm thinking maybe when she takes that first dragon ride, it changes her physically. So I'm kind of like that, or Rainey's, but mostly Rogue, yeah.
No, I like that theory. That's good. I can see that happening, kind of like when Jon Snow's gonna get his white hair when he's resurrected. But Timothée Shadowbond, what? Say hello. Are you Quaithe or what?
Yeah, you can call me Quaith. I'm here at the house. I come seeking dragons. That's why I'm here at the House of the Dragons. You can see, bring mine on screen. Mine's pretty dead at the moment. So, kind of got to rectify that situation. I also got this guy, Daemon, who's sort of my own little dragon.
Yeah, I was gonna say because you can't ride no dead dragon. That ain't gonna work for you. Okay. I am going to wear the costume, but I will not do the voice for the whole stream. We actually...
Oh, no!
We were here to do actual analysis. It is Halloween, and we do want to be fun, but I don't want people to think that we're just here to fool around. We are here to do a season wrap-up, and we have serious content for you, but yeah, so...
Let's get serious.
Yeah, I mean, I know it is fun. I can stay in character for a whole live stream. I do believe I have proven that, but it can be a little grating on the ears for some folk out there. So, anyway, folks, we are here to do a season wrap up. This is Tim. That's Tim under there, in case, yeah. So, we are here so basically, we're going to go through some of our, I guess, we're going to try to drill down into who each character is and what their, I always say like what their conflict is. But basically what I don't want to do is go through every character and list everything that they did. I just want to get right into what's making the characters tick. Now, before we do that, I will also say that you can send in discussion questions if you basically we're here to try to, like I said, dig into what made the season move. So if any question that you have that, just unresolved character issues, questions about, we can do a little bit of where it's going next season, but we've all read Fire and Blood. This is going to be a no spoiler stream. So if we talk about next season, it'll be more in the character arc kind of sense. Like, how will Aemond handle the Storm's End thing when he talk, how will Rhaenyra, how will that turn that we saw at the end of the episode, how will that be handled going forward? Those kind of things. I've also got a couple of good questions that came in on our Discord, but basically that's the tone for today. Overall season discussion type questions will work the best. If you have a more specific thing, you could send that in too. A couple of compliments for your costume coming in, Nettles. As usual, the lovely Nettles. And let's see, there was one other one that came in earlier. Sending this message so you stay away from my house, Squisher. Oh, that's right, Gavin. That's the correct strategy to take. That's the right stratagem. So, because if you let them close, they will kiss you on the lips, and it is all downhill from there. Let me tell you. Not that I'd know, but okay. So I might lapse in and out of character. Yeah. But first, let's talk about the dragons. Here's the curveball. So we talked about the characters all season. I figured we would start with the dragons. The dragons are characters too. Okay? So we don't have to go, crazy with this, but I do feel like the dragons, it's House of the Dragons. So let's take a minute for the dragons and talk about just what our impressions were, what they did, they have different personalities and stuff. So I've got first dragon we met, of course, was Cyrax. And by the way, one of the dragon keepers pronounced it Cyrax. So I continue to say that you can say it however you want. But since Rhaenyra says Cyrax, I guess we'll continue to say Cyrax now that I've made myself change that. But Cyrax is... the first thing that interesting about Cyrax is that they always called Cyrax yellow in Fire and Blood. And the first thing they did was have Lord Commander Westerling say that great golden worm, or that golden beast, I think it was. Every time that golden beast brings you home, it saves my head from going on a spike. So it's our first clue that there was like a little bit of Maester bias in Fire and Blood. They called him yellow, which of course I love yellow, but it's a color associated with, cowardice and things like that. So interesting that we called Cyrax gold instead of yellow. I'm a big fan of Cyrax. I like the look. Seems like a fast dragon, kind of like Meleys, very sleek with the swept-back horns. They use Cyrax a lot to convey Rhaenyra's like royalty, especially with that scene we saw in the last episode where she riding with her crown on her head. They must have some really good stickum keep that crown on when she's flying, but it's definitely epic. Rhaenyra landing on the bridge with her crown, getting off her dragon. So Cyrax hasn't roasted anyone or gone into battle. Basically just Rhaenyra's taxi, but just flying around on a golden dragon. It's very epic and royal, and it seems like they've maybe run with it with this sun symbolism that they've been doing with Rhaenyra. But thoughts on Cyrax, my friends?
Yeah. I of course the dragons are the ones that really pop off the page, right? And before the show, the directors, everyone kept saying over and over again that every dragon has their own personality. So that's what I've been looking out for. And in a past stream, I kind of had started this kind of headcanon theory about the dragons being a manifestation of either the id or the super ego. So whether let's just say whether deep down someone is good or whether they're bad, right? I think Cyrax is a manifestation of Rhaenyra's super ego, like everything that's good about Rhaenyra. Cyrax is like the peaceful, kind of like considerate, wise dragon, also the nurturer mother. How many eggs have we seen Cyrax lay? As well as how many children has Rhaenyra had? So they're very much mirroring each other. But I think Cyrax, instead of Caraxes, some of the other dragons that are more like forceful, like the manifestation of your id, I feel like Cyrax is the good part of Rhaenyra, the wise, nurturing part.
I'm sorry to be. That was really deep analysis for first thing in the morning for us West Coasters still waking up. But I'm laughing because Gavin in the chat is like, "Is Tim asleep?"
I'm pouring my heart out in Timothée Shadow Bay.
There's Tim. There he is. There's Tim. Okay.
So probably gonna have to come off because it was probably gonna clash with my voice too much anyway.
I was also worried about your breathing under there, but he says he did a whole con with the mask on. But no, that was deep, Nettles. I love that. So I said royalty, regalness, but yeah, that's you're probably closer to the mark there. Cyrax has laid a lot of eggs. Daemon says he has a score of them. He also says Cyrax has laid another clutch of eggs. So multiple clutches coming from Cyrax. So she's a dragon mommy, just like Rhaenyra. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I dig that because we can see Caraxes Well, we'll get to Caraxes, but yes, we should consider the dragons' personalities in tandem with the riders. That's probably a good way to think about it. So yeah, what do you think, Tim, of Rogue's bang-up analysis there?
I like it because we do hear, like, every time we hear about a clutch of eggs, it's always Cyrax being the ones to lay them, and that is coming from Rhaenyra, who's also been giving us dropping out a bunch of kids like clockwork here. And just as you said, like the colorization of her being more gold, being a lot more vibrant than the way Cyrax is displayed in the books. But it does make me wish we could have had Sunfire on screen as more of a comparison, like to see just how much the Maesters are downplaying Cyrax's vibrancy compared to Sunfire and what kind of gold streak pink membrane thing he's supposed to have going on.
Well,
do you think Sunfire and Cyrax could be siblings?
It's hard to say.
Or clutch mates?
I think they're about the... No, Sunfire's younger, at least in the books.
Okay.
We do
Never
have
mind then.
we do have one picture of Sunfire, and it's the dragon that's sitting like this on the ground with one. It's actually Cyrax flying over Sunfire, so you can see the different colors. And let me zoom in.
Yeah. Sunfire looks brown.
Well, it's the lighting and stuff, but
Yeah.
there's a little more of a yellow to the gold, whereas Sunfire, of course, has pink wing membranes, which you give it a rosy kind of gold color. So, but that is Sunfire there, for what it's worth. It looks like a similar style of swept-backed horns as Cyrax. To your point, Nettles, the same model of dragon, the horse dragon.
Thank you.
Also, shout out to Sunfire, looking a little bit like Alien. In the Rhaenyra birth scene, when it was real quickly cutting to Sunfire's face screaming, there was Cyrax, sorry, not Sunfire, cutting to Cyrax's face, and there was one where it was just all teeth, and it just made me think of the alien mouth. Shout out to the Dracomorph. Super chat just came through from Jack. What were your favorite and least favorite interpretations, deviations, or alterations to the source material in the first season? That's a great discussion question, so I will table that for the end of the dragon section, and we will rip into that. That's a great discussion topic. Thank you. So, all right. So, yeah, Tim, thoughts on Sunfire? Or Cyrax, rather. Sorry. Or Sunfire, I guess.
Well, I guess now I didn't even realize that we had seen Sunfire at all. I thought, like, Sunfire got completely unnoticed, but if that's literally all we got, then I guess it doesn't count for much. But yeah, like Cyrax, how you said though, Cyrax is like Rhaenyra's taxi, which also plays into like that whole yellow coloring. Anyone who's been up to New York knows.
Yellow cab. We need a yellow cab Cyrax meme. All right. Okay. So there you go.
Sunfire? I think it's quick. It's like to be continued. Like I haven't just going off the show, I have to say to be continued because there's nothing really to go off of.
Yeah, I think that they're saving that. Sunfire does play a pretty big part in a lot of the action from here on out. So obviously, in the books, Aegon flies Sunfire around the city after his coronation. They went a different direction with the whole Meleys thing. So yeah, they're just kind of saving that. But expect Sunfire to be brilliant and magnificent and all that stuff. And let me just a couple other pictures of Cyrax here. So this is Cyrax landing on the bridge in episode 10. It seems like Cyrax could have grown more. It's ironic in the first episode, Alicent's all like, Cyrax is growing fast. And then she doesn't seem to grow much, but she is still pretty big. You can see from the wingspan there. And there's a nice Cyrax growl. Like it looks like she's wearing a banger chain on there. It's like just the harness. So next we come to Worm Boy, the noodle monster. Caraxes.
Wait, so before we go on to Caraxes, just that last picture you had of Cyrax on the bridge, it really made me think of also just how powerful Rhaenyra and Cyrax's bond is. Because I remember that scene how Cyrax gingerly put her feet on the bridge, because I was expecting the bridge to crumble under her weight. Like, this is the complete opposite of what we're going to see with Aemon. Like, I don't know what it is, but not only is Cyrax like the nurturing, mothering, but I think it's also showing the restraint. They're like, yes, I could put my whole weight on the bridge, but I'm going to gingerly put my feet. I'm a controlled dragon. I only breathe fire at funerals when you say Dracarys, so yeah.
That is a good point, because we've observed that dragon control does vary a bit. We've seen Meleys and Rhaenys. Rhaenys has real tight control over Meleys. And then obviously, the Aemond and Arax situation we've discussed ad nauseum. So yeah, it is worth pointing out that Rhaenyra is able to put Cyrax in these situations where there's a lot of tension going on, and expect the dragon to obey and land precisely on the walkway there. So yeah, it does show that like Rhaenyra and Cyrax do have a good bond. Definitely one of the things I could have seen more of, as far as like what's been cut and what do we miss. Just more dragon and dragon rider bonding. Daemon and Laena. We got the one little bit of them flying their dragons together, but like in the books, there's a lot about the Targs sort of joyriding on their dragons. Many different
racing.
Targs do that. So I guess it's a budget thing, but whatever. So Caraxes, let's talk Caraxes. I'll let you go first, Tim.
Yeah, Caraxes is my favorite of the dragons. The worm boy, the noodle boy, our boy with the deviated septum, because that's the way he's supposed to be. I had heard, like, if Caraxes, we had asked the question on an earlier stream, like, what would Caraxes sound like? And I said, well, with that deviated septum, I think if Caraxes could talk, he would sound like Zach Hadel, who's a voice actor, animator, artist, creator of Smiling Friends. So if anyone's familiar with Zach Hadel and you know what his voice sounds like, that's the way I envision, that's the way I hear Caraxes' voice if he could talk. But Caraxes also he's like a deformed dragon. And shout out to Crowfood's daughter, the Disputed Land. She put out a video recently, like it was like just a couple minutes after your last video, Dave.
7 minutes.
7 minutes. And I logged on to YouTube and I'm like, oh, hey, but I'm like, oh, lucky me. But yeah, she put on one talking about dragon deformities, and Caraxes was one that came up with that because he is supposed to be like more of a deformed dragon, which explains like his long neck and just why he looks so different from the rest of the dragons, and that's why he is the blood worm, because he is the wormy boy.
I think Caraxes would have a very hissy voice like that.
Something like that. But yeah.
Slytherin voice.
Very. I mean, he's very snaky.
Yes, very snaky.
This picture is one of my favorites, because you could just tell he's like so happy to just be burning things in the middle of a war zone. He's very much his element. He is a dragon straight from hell. He's got the typical devil horns, so this is really like a demon dragon. And I made a bunch of that, when I talked about the Daemon in Hell video or whatever. But yeah, he's just kind of, there's only 2 red dragons in all of Targaryen history, which is interesting since their sigil is a red dragon, and that would be Meleys and Caraxes. So yeah, Caraxes, he's very much, we talked about, or Nettles brought up the idea of the dragons being, channeling certain aspects of the riders' personalities. Definitely like Caraxes' joy in war mirrors Daemon's. And although it hasn't been addressed in the show, the creators have said, oh, Caraxes, he's always whistling at the female dragons. He's always flirting with the ladies. So obviously that's very Daemon,
What do you think the deformity in Caraxes says about Daemon? Or rather the fact that Daemon could have chosen a dragon like
probably Daemon feeling like an outsider or something like that. And then my other thought is like Daemon is so dragon. You know, he has a couple lizard babies and stuff. What do you think, Tim?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it said that, like, Daemon also purposely sought out the meanest dragon, and at the time that was Caraxes, which just makes it's funny to me that Caraxes is somehow meaner than Vermithor. But I think when Daemon was, but I mean that kind of also makes sense when Daemon's growing up, his grandfather's still alive, so Vermithor's rider's still around, so he probably was a bit more tame, whereas Caraxes was more of a lashing out type of dragon, which is and I also said like Daemon might have been attracted to Caraxes because he is a red dragon and because his mother, who he lost at a very young age, Meleys, was originally her dragon before Rhaenys claimed her, and that was a red dragon. So I had said if Meleys had not been claimed, I think Daemon probably would have gone for her. But Caraxes being another red dragon, on top of being the vicious wild boy that he is it was the next best pick for Daemon.
Cool. Well, I'll just shut up and let you guys talk because you're saying all the smart stuff today. That was deep, Tim. Nice. I like that. His mom wrote a red dragon, so he wrote. That's cool. Go ahead, Nettles.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my take on Caraxes is just out of every single dragon, he's the one who in world I'd be the most afraid of. Like, you know, as far as like going up to a dragon and petting them, like how Daemon did, like I would never do that to Caraxes. Like, he's the one that I'd be scared to meet alone in the pit because there's something about him that's so slithery and menacing. And like, I don't give a shit. I will roast you. Like you know, when Cersei's talking about like, she's scared of encountering Stannis because she won't be able to seduce him. There's something about Stannis where it's like, it doesn't matter your little tips, tricks, sweet talking. There's nothing you can do that's going to save you from this fate. And that's how I feel about Caraxes. There's something about him that's so just like, I am a war machine. Take me off my muzzle. Like, no warmth, no fuzziness at all.
And I also think it fits with the idea that, like, as Tim morphs into Aemond One Eye, that it makes sense that Daemon is sort of embodying the true dragon nature. He's the most Targaryen of all the Targaryens. And so his dragon is just, like I said, just very dragony. Loves to burn shit. And also giving us a little bit of insight into the weird genetic breeding that may have gone into all this stuff. So it's very fitting. I love how they took just the fact that he's called the Bloodworm and figured, oh, he must be extra wormy. And so they extrapolated and made this very unique dragon. So I think that's the first reason why we all love Caraxes. He's just very unique. And the fact that he's like almost deformed and weird is like makes him lovable. He's got that also, he's the wolf dragon type of face. So the most dog-like kind of is the one we relate to, perhaps, you know, but yeah.
Nice.
So, Caraxes has gotten the most screen time. I really like the way he takes off. He takes off the ground in a very interesting way. We've seen it a couple times now. And those hind feet are just so interesting. I love the little leg sails that he has. So he flies completely differently than all the other dragons. And yeah, he looks all skinny and stringy when you see him in the air. But then, of course, when we see him in the stepstones, it's like, no, that's a huge dragon. You know, so yeah.
We know the exact ratio of his foot to man size.
We do know that ratio, yes. So, all right, I have one or two other Caraxes pictures, but we'll go ahead and go to our next dragon. We'll see who that is. So this is from episode 10. Somebody pointed out this one is real similar to a piece of art of Daemon and Caraxes.
It is. I remember that one.
I think it's the Simonetti one, but yeah, so. It looks like Nana Vhagar's up next. Look at her. There she is. Just a monster. In fact, let me put my Vhagar. She's not babysitting the chat like she should be. That's why they're misbehaving. Let's see here. I'm just kidding. You guys are great. Could Cyrax and Sunfire not be from the same clutch? Asks Melanie. Even if Cyrax is much older, the eggs may have hatched at different times. Yeah, I suppose so. But I don't think they need to be from the same clutch to look similar. It seems like these are 3 different types of dragons that are running. But yeah, that's true. The eggs don't necessarily hatch at the same time. They are they're kept warm until they, are ready to hatch or quicken. There's still some blanks that they are filling in on all this stuff. So
yeah, it would just be interesting if they're from the same clutch, because then it's another parallel, because Rhaenyra and Aegon are siblings and they're fighting.
Totally. And so, and as I discussed in the video, the Daemon song video that I put out yesterday, thanks everyone for watching that, of course. It probably, or at least it could be, that all the Targaryen dragons are of the same lineage. And if you think about it, they took 5 dragons from Valyria. 4 of those dragons apparently were dead by the time of the conquest. And then we've got Caraxes, Vhagar, and Valyrian. So if we set aside the whole thing about dragons might be able to change gender, which I think is more about the prince that was promised and less about the male dragons laying eggs. Because it does seem that there are certain dragons that consistently lay eggs and others that don't. And that's how they say this dragon is male and female. So if you just want to say egg-laying dragons, that's fine. But basically all the Targaryen dragons were either laid by Caraxes or Vhagar. All the subsequent dragons, because those are the only 3 the Conquerors had. So Vermithor, Silverwing, unless those eggs are from over 100 years ago from Valyria, they would have been laid by Vhagar or Caraxes. I choose to believe that Vhagar is the great-grandmother of all the dragons, but yeah.
It could be, yeah. I get your math, but it's like, yeah, because they might have came over with 5 full-grown dragons, but what if they came over with 20 eggs? Like, what if there was a lot of eggs in Valyria? So the books mentioned 5 dragons, but they had
well, that's the window of doubt. Yes, exactly right. Is that we don't know how long the eggs can keep. Maybe one of those other 4 dragons laid eggs and then died. So yeah, there's some.
I get the math. Making Vhagar the literal grandma.
Yeah, so, and there are reptiles that reproduce asexually, which I'm going to talk about in a future video when we talk about Visenya. But as far as the dragons go, there's basically a line that says, it's a Septon Barth interpretation, that dragons are changeable as flame and they can change gender. But later they're talking about how the prince that was promised, prophecy, the word for prince is genderless, and so people are looking for a male prince when it could very well be a princess. And so Maester Aemon is like, oh, it's got to be Daenerys. The word is actually genderless, and so therefore it's not necessarily a prince as in male. So we don't know whether or not there's a Jurassic Park situation where the dragons can change gender. I tend to think not, but it's an open question, just to be clear. Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
The joke in my head was just thinking of like some doomsday prophet pulling an Alex Jones. They're putting chemicals in the water to turn the freaking dragons gay.
They're turning the dragons gay.
Feminizing their boys, feminizing our young men.
No, but I do like the idea that Vhagar is like the grandmother to all our current dragons. It does make the most sense. Unless, like what Nettle said, unless there were unaccounted eggs that the Targaryens also brought with them when they first fled that just never got mentioned in the histories. I actually did, like, because Caraxes, is it confirmed that Caraxes was female? That Balerion was the...
No.
As much as you can confirm that she's female, like,
Yeah.
That any of them are.
Yeah, so Vhagar, Jace calls Vhagar that hoary old bitch, and somebody should wash out Jace's mouth with soap for that, if Nana doesn't get to him first. But that's what happened. Nana thought that Luke was Jace, and that's why she chomped him. That's what that was about. No, but seriously, so that's the only indication that Vhagar is female. Other than that, we really actually don't know. Caraxes is not. There's no gendered words ever applied to Caraxes. So some people would assume that might follow the gender of the conquerors, but that's not always the case, obviously. Aemon rode, who rode Meleys before Rhaenys? It was Aemon, wasn't it?
No, it was their mother, Alyssa.
Oh, it was Alyssa, yeah. Aemon rode Caraxes. But Vhagar's been ridden by both men and women, as we've seen, so. All right.
Well, for me, okay, so this is completely my headcanon. I think that the dragons change sex according to who their rider is. That the dragon bond is so strong. Like, for example, in the text, it says they adopt their loves and hate of their rider. For something
sure.
to be that strong that now I hate the same person you hate, to the fact that even though you're saying no, serve me, I'm going to blast fire. Even though you're saying no, serve me, I'm going to chomp them out of the air. Because I'm working on your hate that's greater than what you're saying. It makes me feel that the bond goes so deep that now we're becoming the same sex. And the reason, and it doesn't, in my head, it doesn't happen like immediately, like, oh, Aemon jumps on Vhagar and she was a girl with Laenor, now she's immediately a boy with Aemon. I think it's something that happens over time as the bond deepens, because, the first ride don't mean nothing. You could die the next day. But the reason in nature why amphibians and certain reptiles change sex is always out of need. It's like if you're in a population and you're looking around, there's not enough boys. Okay, then you'll turn yourself into a girl, or vice versa, or however it works. So I feel like when we look at Fire and Blood in the Targaryen history, we see lulls in Targaryen birth. Sometimes there's one heir. Sometimes they make 13 children. Sometimes, it ebbs and flows, and I feel like that's because of the thing that the Targaryens, like, part of the Targaryen downfall is not paying attention to women. So if a dragon needs a female rider to become a female to lay eggs, and you guys are persecuting your women, putting them on the back burner, not giving them power or enough to become dragon riders, you have lulls. So yeah, that's basically what I think. You need Targaryen female dragon riders to continue the Targaryen dynasty. And if you get rid of them, specifically the female dragon riders, the Targaryens lose big time.
So
Yeah,
I like that theory. And there is, Minty and I have been chatting a lot about that mystery of why the dragons died out. There's a lot of good theories about there's Maester Angle, there's Preston Jacobs, dragon hatching gene. There's the idea of, did they, marry out too much? A lot of people died in the Dance of the Dragons, and so there may have simply been a loss of knowledge transmission. Did Daemon teach his song, his knowledge of building egg incubators or what, in the show canon? But even in the book canon, it's the same thing. Like, when the Targs come to Westeros, they have all the Valyrian knowledge. By the time we get to Rhaegar, he's rediscovering certain stuff in scrolls because Baelor the Blessed burned a bunch of shit. And again, a bunch of people died in the dance. So there's a lot of questions about dragons. And that's why it's fun to talk about things like the Dracomorph, Lemur theory, the dragon bond, the gender of the dragons, how the eggs work. It's just definitely a good example of George, how he does not like to spell out the magic. He likes to leave mystery because then it seems more magical and it leaves room for all of us to theorize about it. So yeah, I like that theory, Nettles, and I wouldn't be surprised at anything really as far as the eggs go, because the dragons are probably an engineered creature, either from worms and wyverns or, just maybe they... at the very least, they've been modified to be able to make the dragon bond, it seems like. So, yeah, hard to say how that goes. But I do love the fact that House of the Dragon is going into this stuff. Because Ryan has George's ear, and just in case you didn't know, Ryan and George, they're really tight. George basically recruited Ryan for this project, and Ryan bounces his scripts off of George. So when it comes to stuff like incubating eggs in that little thing, like, this is the kind of shit that they are talking about over email and on the phone. And so, although
That's
they are
good.
separate canons, most of the deep lore kind of shit that House of the Dragon is showing us is probably going to be very close to in line with whatever the book canon turns out to be. And I'm going to talk, I got an Aegon's Prophecy video coming soon.
Okay.
But Vhagar, actually, Tim, what are your thoughts on specifically the eggs? And we can make this a Caraxes thing. The egg hatching stuff that they're showing. Like, Dany's eggs have petrified and turned to stone. Her hatching them seems to be somewhat miraculous. And that seems to be why they're doing this egg incubator thing. Like, as soon as Daemon pulls the eggs out of the mountainside, he's like, put these in the incubator. And we've seen that the eggs are born in the dragon goo crusted over thing, which keeps them warm. So keeping them warm is obviously a thing. And then we also know that the eggs are placed in the cradles with the babies. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts, Tim, on the dragon lore that they're getting into on the show in general? You can take it any direction you want, but I think this is one of the most exciting aspects of the show for a lot of us.
Yeah, like when we think of the dragons as an engineered creature, like the idea of like the nuclear mule, because mules are bred, but they're usually sterile. And we've already known, like, even at the peak of Targaryen power, when they've had more dragons than ever, it still seemed like it was a 50-50 chance on whether or not these eggs would hatch. A lot of them didn't see whether or not they're like just laid and not fertilized in the way that like a lot of chicken eggs don't hatch. So it seems to me like dragon breeding and dragon birth is something that was never quite a straight thing like it would be for most animals, the way we think like any other normal reptile, just lay the egg, keep it warm, eventually it'll hatch. Like it's never a given with dragons. And with Daemon's taking of the eggs, like we see him, he pulls out, it looked like it looked like a form of tar that they were kind of creating to keep the dragons warm. And I'm sure the incubation is just to be there to make absolutely sure that when these eggs hatch that they know of it. Because the idea of wild dragons is not something we've ever gotten to see. Like what happens when a dragon out in the wild hatches the egg? Does it like chew through the tar, and then where does it go? Does it go to its mother, or are they like kind of like baby crocodiles and baby crocodiles usually will make that like that like laser sound to call their mother, and then their mother will come and collect them. They climb inside of her mouth and she'll take them into the water. But another reptile, baby turtles, their mother's not around when they hatch. So when they hatch and they burrow out of the sand, like they're completely on their own to make it to the water. So that's a complete unknown in nature, how wild dragons work when they hatch. Like, is the mother coming to collect them?
Tim, so check this out. Minty blew my mind the other day by asking me, is it possible that the dragon eggs can't hatch without Targaryens to... Oh, Nettles is raising her hand. Go ahead, Nettles, go ahead.
Keep going. I agree.
Okay, so just basic idea is that, like, yeah, if the ancient Valyrians or even Great Empire of the Dawn Ashai people engineered dragons / the dragon bond, that it may be that they don't have a normal reproductive cycle at all, and all they do is lay the eggs, and it takes magic and bonding with a human or some combination of those things to hatch dragons. Now, there are wild dragons on Dragonstone, the Cannibal and the Sheep Stealer and Grey Ghost. However, we don't know if maybe those were dragons that escaped from the hatcheries. They could be Cannibal was there supposedly before the Targaryens got there, and the Valyrians were on Dragonstone for about 100 years before the Targaryens took over. So there could have been dragon activity on Dragonstone before the Targaryens came there, and that's where the wild dragons come from. But thoughts, Nettles or Tim, on the idea that potentially the eggs, either they can't hatch on their own, or like they don't live very often on their own, or something like that?
No, yeah. Tim, you asked a question about dragons in the wild, and I was just about to say there are no dragons in the wild. In my headcanon, like the eggs have to be in in proximity to a Targaryen, because look at Dany's 3 eggs. They were in the wild for 150, no, 200 years they were in the wild, not even close to hatching. And then they get close to Dany, and her wanting them and creating that bond, okay, they're able to hatch. Like, and even Cannibal, he's a wild dragon. He's not a dragon in the wild. He's on Dragonstone. You know, he's at the Targaryen home, so he's still close to that bloodline. Just like there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, there must always be a Targaryen on Dragonstone, so these dragons can come home to and be close to that blood.
Or it could be like they can't hatch dragons away from Valyria. Like the Valyrian mountains were magical, and you know, or maybe they can hatch on Dragonstone in the vents, but not away from there. So to hatch them at King's Landing or on, you know, in the Dragon Pit or whatever, you need magic. There's a lot of
I think you need a Targaryen, like you're saying, like that ancestor bloodline. You need that link for the 3 heads for even the dragon to hatch. Daenerys has
I
that
think
link,
so, yeah.
Like, so that you have to be in proximity to somebody.
So one of the things I do want people to remember is that the volcanoes are magic themselves.
Yeah.
Like the magic flows through the elements in this story. The Valyrians, like just like Viserys explains, like they build their blood mage tower, the Inaugrion, close to the volcano. That's where the power comes from. So these fireworms that crawl through the mountains of Valyria, like they feed off of that magical energy in all likelihood. So even the fireworms kind of sound like magical creatures. I mean, they can breathe fire. It's not something that anything could do on planet Earth. So, you know, it could spit burning acid stuff, but like breathing fires, that's pretty much a magic thing. So point is, yeah, the dragon hatching definitely could be tied to literal volcanic mountains as well. And that's could be what the Targaryens are essentially harnessing in order to hatch the eggs. But let's get back on track here a little bit with Vhagar. Although that was a delightful. So I did want to talk about all that stuff today. So that's when it happened.
Yeah.
Beatrice says, "Oh, sorry, Tim. What was that?"
I was gonna say, like, I had more on that to Nettles' point.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna save that for when we got to the actual dragon bond. When we got to what went down with Aemond and Luke. So
okay, if you think that'd be better, then sure.
Yeah.
But write it down so you don't forget.
Oh no, I was gonna bring back the Shadowbinder costume because it goes with it.
Yeah, Tim won't forget. He's like a machine. He's a dynamo. Remember, Beatrice says the scene with Vhagar flying above Caraxes was absolutely terrifying. Yeah, especially the one shot of the shadow of Vhagar above. That it really was horror movie shit. So yeah, really hope to see, loves to see them showing more of the dragons. Well, they got no choice. We got a bunch of dragon fights coming up, so they're gonna have to show them. Thank you, Beatrice. And let's see here. What clutch does Tessarion come from? For the most part, we do not know what dragons laid what eggs. There's only a couple times that it's even listed. So thoughts on Vhagar. We've obviously make lots of jokes about Vhagar. I think the most important thing to understand is that she is a monster. It literally is like trying to saddle Godzilla. And we saw that with Aemond One Eye in the last episode. And I made a whole video about it, so I've got my thoughts about that. But thoughts on Vhagar and the idea of trying to saddle Godzilla.
No, yeah. The thing about Vhagar is I feel like everyone wants the biggest dragon in the realm until they get the biggest dragon in the realm. And I feel like Vhagar is a lot of trouble to get on. She's like, for me, that's not the dragon I would choose. Yeah, I should, in a military standpoint, yeah, sure. But for me to have like a dragon at my leisure for me to hop on and off of, no, this is like every time you get on her, it has to be a calculated move. But yeah, that's what I think about trying to climb Vhagar.
Yeah, it's the whole like don't pull out a gun if you're not going to use it thing, which they repackage in a Game of Thrones. If you remember, Robb draws his sword in the Godswood when he hears that they've abducted or they've imprisoned Ned, and I think it's
Maester Luwin
or Roderick Cassell. I forget which, but one of them is like, is an enemy here to fight? Like, put your sword away unless you mean to use it. So that's the whole thing. Like, You don't pull out Vhagar unless you're preparing to destroy a city. You know.
So Vhagar's riders are Visenya, Balon, Lena, and Aemon One-Eye.
Correct.
So far. Just letting everyone out there know. Like, compared to Cyrax and Sunfire, who only have one rider. So yeah, I think it's almost like, you know, it's like the difference between somebody who's like 18 out of high school and first relationship, or they married their high school sweetheart, and then somebody who's been through like 4 divorces with a lot of money and children involved. Like the difference between like Vhagar and like a dragon Cyrax, you know, the one rider dragons, and then like the 2+ dragons. It's like a, you know, Vhagar needs to be on the Real House Dragons of Westeros. Like, married a lot of basketball players.
For me, it's always been like the funny thing is the Pokemon analogies that a lot of people have been picking up on, like the joke that Aemon doesn't have enough badges, but it does bring me back. It does make me think like the conversation we had last time, like the difference between when you claim a dragon that had a previous rider versus when riding a dragon that you were the only rider of, or even one that the egg hatched in the cradle and that person grew up with the dragon. It is very much a thing, like Pokemon that you didn't capture yourself. If they're at too high a level, they won't listen to you. And that's pretty much what we kind of see with Aemon here. Like he's a brand new rider. This is the first time he's claimed a dragon, but it is one of the oldest dragons, well, the oldest dragon living, who has had numerous riders in the past. So the idea of him having complete control over it at the very get-go is something that, like, yeah, can be called into question, especially with Vhagar, was there for the conquering. Vhagar would be the type who's like, look, I know what you want. I've been around this block before. Like, don't tell me no. Like, you listen to me. And that's the thing, like Vhagar very much is more in control than Aemon is, because Vhagar's got more actual combat experience, whereas Aemon doesn't. Aemon has no idea what he's doing.
But here's the thing, what about, now I'm just thinking about, remember when Bran goes into a crow or something, and he's like, someone's been here before. He can feel the presence of the seer.
The shadow on the soul, yeah.
Like, is that the same with Vhagar?
Well, it could be. And just to follow up on my video that I just made, the idea of stuffing, I was talking about stuffing a Valyrian ghost into a dragon. That would be shadow binding. I should have used that word. We actually have precedent for this. Shadow binding, essentially, as I understand it, is its most literal sense. It means binding shadows to things. So Melisandre's doing shadow binding when she has the shadow baby, because she's peeling off Stannis' shadow and binding it to this fixed smoke form that it can use to kill people. Because the shadow baby is somewhat material. It can materialize the sword to cut Renly's throat. So it's a thing that's been bound. And then the resurrection, the fire magic resurrection, also appears to be shadow binding, because it seems like what's happening is that, like with Beric, for example, he's a walking corpse. His body hasn't been reanimated. It's not functioning. It's just a meat puppet. But his ghost, essentially, meaning like a remnant of Beric, not all of Beric, but just some of him, is tied to his meat sack and is now piloting it. So that, to me, is also shadow binding. So it seems like any sort of control with the ghost or the shadow is under the purview of shadow binding. So the Valyrians, obviously, if you know anything about my Great Empire of the Dawn ideas, or even just Septon Barth's rumors, the Valyrians have ties to ancient Ashai. And ancient Ashai also is a place where dragons come from, dragon eggs come from, and things like that. So most of the shadow binding that we know is tied to Ashai via Quaithe and Melisandre, both of whom studied magic in there, and both of whom call themselves shadow binders. So the idea that the Valyrians could have been using shadow binding to stuff ghosts into dragons, it has somewhat of a precedence. It's not completely out of left field and only dependent on the lemur thing, which is fun, but you know. So yeah, I do think there could be, to answer your question, Nettles, it could be that when I didn't go so far in the videos to say this, but it could be that every dragon rider that's bonded to a dragon, when they die, they go into the dragon or merge with the dragon, the ancestor spirit, as I was saying. That could be more of an agglutination of dead Targaryens, just like with the Weirwood hive mind. There does seem to be a lot of parallels between the Green Seer skin changer magic and the dragon magic, even if they're not directly connected. Tim, I see you itching
Ice
to
and
say
fire.
I was gonna say like the second life, how the soul enters the animal, like when Varamir Sixskins wants to take control of his wolf when he's first like coming to terms with the idea of dying before he goes after Thistle. And the idea is that eventually the mind will become overtaken by the wolf and kind of like submerge into the wolf's consciousness. Maybe it's the same with Targaryens, like a second life in the dragon for a while, and then the dragon consciousness consumes it and goes back to being more of into its dragon mindset.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought of that, just that very thing, about how the longer a skin changer spends in the wolf, like Bran, the more they lose themselves to the wolf. And then second life, same thing. The spirit eventually fades into the wolf and becomes that shadow on the soul that Nettles was mentioning. So it's not, I just want to be clear, the Dragon Lords aren't skin changing so far as we know. If there is a connection between green seeing and the dragon bond, which there could be, it would go back like 10,000 years. And it would be like, think about the dragon bond would be like a modified version of skin changing, perhaps. Like maybe the first Dragon Lords were skin changers, and that's how they facilitated the dragon bond. But the thing to understand is that the dragons are fire made flesh. And there's a thing about fire and skin changers. Like Melisandre burns Orell's spirit out of the eagle with fire. And when Bran tries to go back into Summer after Summer's been injured, he describes it as like touching a hot stove. Like, oh, he just pulled back on instinct. He couldn't even inhabit the wolf. So it seems like a skin changer might have trouble trying to skin change a dragon, which is fire made flesh. And we've seen the Targaryens are obviously different than everyone else, and they're the ones that can bond with dragons. So if there's a connection, it's an ancient one, and it's very theoretical. As far as we know in the books, there are different magics.
Okay, so I just thought of something else. What if Daenerys is finally both, having the dragon bond and the green seer bond? Let's just go with me here. Let's pretend she has enough of the Blackwood blood.
She does. No, she has
manifest.
as much as Bloodraven does. Yeah, actually.
To manifest. Oh God. So like kind of that question. I think I asked this last week. Just kind of like a devil's advocate question. Like, okay, how is Dany able to ride one dragon, but command the other two? Like, the other two dragons in the show knew where to burn. And the answer for that, which would be fun, but it would give Daenerys too many eggs in her basket. But if she could have the dragon bond while riding Drogon, but warg the other two dragons and control them and tell them where to spit fire, that would be too Superman, like having every single power. But oh my gosh, I just excited myself.
Well, that's probably, I would guess that that's not the direction that George would be going with it. But I like to ask the question this way, okay? Daenerys and Rhaegar and all their generation, there was 3 generations of brother-sister incest leading up to that. But before that, the last 2 families that married into the bloodline in consecutive generations were Dane and Blackwood. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, why would George choose those 2 houses? The Danes, who are the most obvious connection to like a Shai or the ancient, great empire of the dawn of any house. And then the Blackwoods, who just gave us Bloodraven. So obviously he's showing us like Blackwood plus Targaryen. Well, we got a green seer out of that last time, so yeah, I do wonder if that's part of Dany being able to wake the dragons again. Is one of those two bloodlines, either the original Dragon Lord infusion of Dane or the Blackwood skin changer bond, but that's all theoretical. So let's
It's all for fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a fun thing to think about. Like, what if you could do both? Ice magic and fire magic. But okay, okay. Back to Vhagar though. So
well,
those four,
hold on,
right?
just real quick. John is both Targaryen and skin changer, so this could be a thing that George is doing with both of them. It's not out of left field. It could be that the combination is going to produce some interesting thing that they can do to save the world at the very end of the story that we didn't see coming. So just put a pin in that. The fact that Dany has Blackwood blood, a fair amount of it, as much as Bloodraven, actually. So,
But yeah, I just wanted to say that based on Vhagar's four riders, like the common theme is brave, like literally Balon the Brave, like a 3-year-old punching Balerion, like come on, like you're made of great stuff. And then you have like people like Visenya, like you think of her as like even though she's a woman, like you think of her as equal as much as a conqueror and brave as Aegon. You think of her out in the fields too with her sword and everything like that. And then of course Laena, who I like now, given that Vhagar is her dragon. Now I like the Laena death scene a lot more because now Laena is more akin to people like Balon who would punch a dragon, Visenya who would fight a war. Now she's someone. There's something inside her that's so bold and brave that she would rather burn to death, one of the most painful ways to go, than go out like a weakling bleeding. And then we have Aemon who like lost an eye and said, "I don't give a shit. I got a dragon out of it." He's everything else, but he's brave.
that's
So yeah, Vhagar equals bold or brave.
very well said, and I totally agree. I started a whole bunch of shit on Twitter last week by comparing Aemond and Visenya, but
Oh no!
it's really, I mean, they really do have the same instincts, and you'll see, especially once we get into how Aemond acts in the war. But if you look at how Visenya waged war, well, I started off by saying, okay, look, neither one of them really ever tell a joke or laugh. Like,
Yeah.
Aemond did the whole strong routine at dinner, but that was more of a trolling. Like, he wasn't laughing, okay? So, witty, yes, but they don't tell jokes to be funny. Like, that's not, they're both dead serious. They're both vicious and aggressive in war. And like I said, we'll see that. But, I think you nailed it. I think that's like, it's almost like Vhagar respects a certain kind of rider. Go ahead, Tim.
What if Aemond was just a rebound? Like, they brought up the idea that Vhagar is lonely, that there had been that years had gone by between when Balon passed to when Laena claimed her, but then Aemond claims her only a few days after Laena's death, and like going back to like oh, she's lonely, and instead of waiting years and years again for another rider, she goes with the first one to try and claim her. So then I was like, maybe Aemond's just a rebound.
I told you she's a housewife. She's a housewife. She needs another husband.
Well, in all seriousness, though, it's possible that maybe the dragon is more open to rebonding right after the loss of a rider. That's not a crazy thought at all. Another comparison between Visenya and Aemond, not only are they ruthless in war and very serious, like, don't forget, Visenya also helped Maegor wage a usurpation of a sibling. Like, they locked up Jaehaerys and the Aenys' other kids. Yeah.
Tortured.
And so she helped Maegor usurp Aenys' son, Aegon the Uncrowned. So they really are pretty similar. Like, Visenya wanted to go and burn Old Town to the ground. And that's essentially how Aemond conducts the war, even though obviously Aemond is a high tower. But it's not the allegiances that matter. It's the method. It's the personality. So, yeah, you're going to see when the war starts. I had a thought. So, again, this is not a spoiler conversation. But in general, Aemond and Vhagar burn a lot of shit in this war, okay? That's what is in Fire and Blood. But now that we've seen what it's like to fly Vhagar in battle, you kind of understand, like, anytime you take Vhagar out and start the burning, there's not necessarily an off switch. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we do see Aemond, you know, wreaking havoc or whatever, now it makes a little more sense. Be like, yeah, once you start burning towns, you might have burned 4 instead of 2 that you meant to burn, or like whatever, you know. So, all right, next dragon, and we're already getting into some character analysis too, so that's cool. Another great Vhagar picture, the big gullet. Oh, what a monster! That one really shows the size. Look, that's little Aemond there standing on the dune. Just huge.
The wings.
So here's Derpy Grey Ghost. Grey Ghost. Seasmoke. Sorry. Seasmoke.
Like, Grey Ghost isn't here, guys.
There is no Grey Ghost yet. Yeah, Seasmoke. So Seasmoke, pretty cool. Like, apart from Caraxes, this is the dragon that's burned the most and done the most war stuff. So we know this is kind of a medium-sized dragon, but very formidable. A lot of great scenes, burning the archers, you know, scooping in, grabbing somebody with the foot and flinging them off. Laenor's, woo, riding the dragon. So great stuff from Seasmoke. Go ahead.
I feel like for me, Seasmoke is like the frat boy who like woo, that frat boy who just get her done, and then he like goes off to his first war in Iraq, and he's just happy to be alive, like throwing back his beers. You could call him for a war, he's down. Call him to help you move. Like, he's just like that bro dragon. And I love that the show made me want like a gray silvery dragon now. I thought I would want like the red, the gold dragons, but every time I see Seasmoke and Caraxes, I'm like, well, hold on. I kind of like these little invisible dragons because, like, in the right light, they turn invisible in the sky. So pretty and right on.
Yeah, think about. I've thought about that too. Like Seasmoke or Grey Ghost. The names imply that they're hard to see in certain situations. So yeah, kind of a stealth dragon. Go ahead, Tim.
The way I like about Seasmoke is, like, we talked how a dragon is not a slave and they're definitely not pets, but for the most part, when the dragons are named, they're always after like some kind of Valyrian god or definitely some kind of root word in the Valyrian language. But then here we get Seasmoke. He's like the first dragon to have like a pet name, like he Spot the dragon almost.
Well, Silverwing perhaps.
Oh, Silverwing. Oh,
but similar, still same point though.
Yeah. Well, it's the first one. It's the first one we see in House of the Dragon that has kind of naming convention that goes away from Valyrian words to something that sounds more like something you would name like a pet. But the thing with Seasmoke is you could tell he's, because I believe he's one that Laenor grew up with, if I'm not mistaken, and you can see the definite trust and bond that they have together, like just how excited Laenor is and how excited Seasmoke is to be joining in with him in this war. Like they're having the time of their lives, even though they're murdering so many people. So
let me grab Alicia Patience's question here. By the way, shout out to Elisa. I need to have you on sometime again on a stream. Everyone's, totally. Elisa's family. And let's see. LML, do you think Seasmoke knows Laenor is alive, or is more likely the show breaks the lore that there can only be one rider per dragon? I kind of think they're going to sew that up somehow. Either Laenor might die somewhere, in the Stepstones, or they'll address it and at least explain that he's given up the dragon bond, or that it grows, Daemon will say, well, if you don't use the dragon bond for a decade, it goes dormant. Everyone knows that. And we'll all be like, oh, of course. Right.
I mean,
They better not change no lore.
I mean,
dragon bond is strong. Don't do that. No.
So that wouldn't fly with you?
No. They better kill him off screen.
They got to kill
can
him.
say, "Look,
So Nettles says they got to kill him. Tim, what do you think?
just kill him off screen and that's it."
So Nettles hates Laenor and thinks he deserves to die. Got it. Okay, canceled. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I made a joke on Twitter, but it makes sense to me when you apply it. It's and the joke is like, Laenor too far away. Dragon Wi-Fi signal has been lost.
Oh my
New
gosh.
user has logged onto the network. But to me, it made sense that if Laenor gets too far away, that maybe the dragon bond is just broken. That if he's too maybe like the signal is just lost, and now Seasmoke is up for grabs again.
So Daenerys doesn't exist. Daenerys and Drogon don't exist on separate areas of the continent. No, a dragon always knows where their rider is. Stop it. This is magic. It defies distance and Wi-Fi.
Well, no, I agree
Stop
with you.
it.
I agree with you, Nettles, but what about the time? What about 10 years? You know what I mean?
10 years is a choice. The dragon can go visit Laenor whenever he wants to.
Okay, well, I'm just curious.
Want to.
I wouldn't.
Because think about it. If Laenor and Seasmoke are both bros, right? Seasmoke's like, yeah, I'm in war, bro. When do you need me to help you move? And Laenor is the same way. He's a bro to Rhaenyra. He's like, I'm friends with everyone. I'm just trying to be where the party's at. Where's the war? So Laenor's doing his own thing, and he's happy to be away from his friends and family and riches. So Seasmoke must be happy to be munching on sheep in Sothoros on weekends or binge drinking. We don't know what Seasmoke's doing, but
Binge drinking?
binge sheeping. I don't know.
That fire wine. Drinking that fire wine.
Yes. Whatever Laenor is on, whatever mood he's on is exactly what Seasmoke is on.
So
That's how I see it.
I think I agree with that, and it looks like the chat does too. Carl says, I prefer till death do us part. Minty's pointing out 10 years is nothing to a dragon that can live 200 or 300 years. So
Exactly.
I think that's right. I would prefer a more elegant explanation. I feel bad saying I hope Laenor dies. You know what I mean? I would prefer Laenor to have a happy retirement. I like that idea.
Yeah.
I like the change. But it does need to be addressed somehow. So the other option is that Laenor comes back. He either comes back in the place of a different character, or maybe he comes back and dies in battle, and then Seasmoke is claimed, by a new right. So there's a few different ways they could write it back in. I do think that they're handling this stuff with care, based on what we've seen so far. So I wouldn't expect it to be like latter season Game of Thrones, where it's it doesn't make sense. Don't think about it. You know what I mean? So there are no leaders at the Citadel.
Oh my gosh. I don't hope that Laenor dies. I can just try to predict writing and what would be the simplest thing. It's kill him off screen. That way Rhaenyra doesn't do it. We don't have her, so her she's not sullied, but he's out of the way.
Oh yeah, of course if he comes back, that creates a problem for Daemon and Rhaenyra having married potentially.
And having bastards.
That's true. That's true. So
Off-screen death.
we'll see. Off-screen death, yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
Death,
but my main thing is that I do expect them to address it and not just leave it hanging. But Laenor, he's still rowing. He's out there with Gendry.
he hasn't gotten there yet.
So shout out to Seasmoke. Definitely cool dragon. I like how they added Laenor to the Stepstones. Don't forget, Laenor is not in the Stepstones War in the books. So
right.
to start answering the question from Jack about most and least favorite interpretations and deviations, I like Seasmoke and Laenor having the played up role, taking part in the war, and I like him escaping instead of being murdered. So I like both of those changes. You guys agree?
Yes.
There you go.
No,
waffling. It depends on how they resolve the dragon thing, right?
Yeah. Yes, the war, but no, the escaping and.
Yeah, I definitely hope they don't cut the future character that we're talking about that rides Seasmoke. He's a great character on his own, so I hope that he's not cut. I doubt that he would be, but we'll see.
Yeah. For me, it's just too modern that he runs away with his lover for a happily ever after. I would have rather seen it being him pleading for his life, Rhaenyra, how could you do this for me? And she's like, I choose the throne. It's her that kills him. Or I would have rather seen it it'd be a drunken tiff with a lover to show that hey, men make mistakes when they start to drink in the coral. Like I would have just rather have just seen it like that. But now that he is away on vacation in Cancun, I love that for Lenore. So I'm happy either way.
Cool. Well, like I said, I think the some of it depends on how they resolve this thing with Seasmoke. So we stay tuned and we will see. And there's another Seasmoke. There's a nice shot of the wings. Really like how they did the coloration on that. So that brings us to Meleys. And I've just made a video recently about the whole decision not to burn or whatever. I think we talked about it as well on the live stream. But Meleys, first thing, we're told Meleys is very fast. That's what we have from Fire and Blood. And we saw that both in the aerodynamic design of her head, as you can see here, and the way that she booked it out of the dragon pit, folded the wings and like leapt through the doors, took one bounce and then was off. Like it was a very agile takeoff move that they made. So also they showed us in a different scene when Meleys was flying, like how fast she was. She sort of zoomed by the camera and they made it look really fast. So they're definitely running with that idea that this is one of the fastest, if not the fastest dragons out there. And a pretty good sized dragon as well, one of the larger ones. And the most obvious thing is that if I go back a picture, this fringe of horns is meant to look like a crown. And so that's why she's called the Red Queen, not just because Rhaenys is the queen who never was.
Yep, that's just another, you know me, I'm going to get into these dragon and rider parallels. Like, as we know, a crown is also a weapon symbolically. And in this picture that you're looking at, that is a freaking weapon around Meleys's head. And it's funny that Rhaenys is always choosing not to use the crown as a weapon. The first time when they had that council, what if she did rally those swords? You know, like we're seeing this with Daemon and Rhaenyra. Daemon and Rhaenyra right now are in the same position that Rhaenys and Corlys were like 30 years ago. And they chose peace. But instead, Rhaenyra has Daemon by her that's like, we're going to war, we're going to war. He's driving this war machine, right? So it's like Rhaenys back then could have used her crown as a weapon to get what she wants, the realm. She could have used it now in this scene. She could have burned them. She still didn't use it. So I think that says something about her, that she has this weapon and she's not using it. And then, very restrained too. Like that dragon is very controlled. She did kill some people there, but still I'm seeing a lot of control like in that dragon.
Yeah, it's almost like Cyrax, similar vibe, like very regal and poised, but bigger and with more potential to do destruction. And I'm sorry, but Rhaenys sitting on top of the dragon with the smoke sort of clearing out, and then you see her face and she's just like got that look. I mean, I don't care if they call it fan service or whatever. Like, that shit was epic. I assume that people are here for epic shit on occasion without, like, rolling their eyes. I mean, this is fantasy, right? I mean, that shit was epic. I loved it. It was menacing. And right away, you were like, that sort of steely undertone that's always been in her voice. I've pointed out a couple times, like, don't forget she's a dragon rider. Dragon riders talk different because they ride dragons. Like, she's always conveyed that presence. And so when you see her on the dragon, it really seemed right. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. This is somebody who's ready to fuck shit up with her dragon, when she chooses to. So, and I almost thought that the choosing was almost more powerful because it's like, I'll decide who I want to burn and when, and you're helpless no matter what I do,
Tim.
Well, Meleys for me was always my example of the whole dragon inheritance law back when that was being fought over, when Aemon claimed Vhagar, and the idea of did Aemon steal Vhagar? Because Meleys is not Rhaenys. Rhaenys is not the original rider because Meleys belonged to Alyssa Targaryen. And the idea of dragon, if a dragon is supposed to pass from parent to child after death, well, then that would mean that if we were to think that Rhaena had some kind of intrinsic right to Vhagar because of her mother because after her mother's death rather than Aemond. Well, then the same would apply then in the case of Meleys, because Alyssa died when Viserys and Daemon were really young, and neither of them had claimed a dragon, so they should have gotten, if dragons are supposed to be something that's inherited, then they should have gotten first dibs. But no, Rhaenys claimed her. And it doesn't seem like Viserys or Daemon ever begrudged her for it. Like, hey, you took our mom's dragon. Like, no, they seem to have acknowledged that there is no inheritance, that you claim a dragon and that is how you get that right. You take the bold action to claim one. But then with Meleys too, and then Meleys is also a good example again of this idea of when we have a dragon that had a previous rider but is claimed by a new rider, how control can go into that, because Meleys and Rhaenys have had decades to foster their relationship together. Even though Rhaenys is not the original rider, we can definitely see Rhaenys has more control over Meleys. It's something that Aemond doesn't have, being a new rider of a dragon that had previous riders. But also Aemond has only had, I think, after a time jump, 6 years to bond with Vhagar. So it's like a good example of how these dragon rider relationships with their dragons can form over years, like just how much time and effort needs to go into really getting the dragon to be in sync with you.
And here's another thing I'll throw out into this conversation real quick. The mental state of the rider. Like a divided mind, like Aemond was angry and he was expressing all his rage at Luke and then tried to suddenly say no. So he wasn't sure about what he really wanted to do. He was flip-flopping, and he lost control of his dragon. Luke, to the extent he lost control of Arax, although I think that was just more about dragons will attack eventually when cornered, he was obviously very afraid. And that terror would decrease, well, first of all, it would flow through the dragon bond to the dragon and make him more terrified. So Rhaenys, you can see, is very composed in that moment, and so is her dragon. So I think that's a big part of it too, as well as the experience. You look like you wanted to chime in, Nettles, but I guess you disagree. Okay.
No, I was just thinking about like Rhaenys being composed, and I'm like, wait, who are her parents again? So I was thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know now.
So let's see here. I want to get to some of these super chats real quick. Silver Scale said, I used to think scaled eggs are weird, but some sharks lay corkscrew eggs. It sounds painful, but so can a human baby be. Right. Well, you figure the scales are all laying one direction. So if it comes out in one direction, the right direction, then it's not too big a deal maybe. But I don't know, they're freaking dragons. So this is getting very granular, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole process is probably freaky deaky. It's the dragon sex you should be sending me super chats about. And Sir Ryan is sending in a question about Aegon's prophecy and why Aegon wasn't marrying Targaryens to Starks as soon as the North joined the kingdom. So that is a question I will address in a future video. It's a little bit outside of the purview of today, but real quickly, I will just say that it probably did play a factor in the Torrhen Stark submitting and Aegon giving the North so much leeway. So I think we should assume there was communication. Why didn't they make a marriage pact right away? Well, I think the Targaryens are mostly concerned with keeping it in the family at that point. But yeah, we'll see. What'd you say? Right, he didn't have kids to marry, so it was a whole generation before there was even any free Targaryens to marry to anyone. And they were still doing intermarriage in that second generation too, except for Maegor marrying everyone. So I will, but like I said, Ryan, I'm going to do a video about this, and then we'll do a follow-up live stream. So we will get into that question in detail at a certain point. Let's see. Beatrice says, do you think we'll see some eggs hatch on the show? Yeah, I'm almost surprised we didn't see that in season 1. But yeah. I have to think, why wouldn't they, right? JR,
At the end, I think you'll have to, yeah.
who would it be? Maybe like Morning?
Yeah, at the end,
Yeah.
just to
And
say,
also,
like,
Aegon the Younger and baby Viserys are each given dragon eggs.
Oh, very true. Yeah, Aegon's egg, right. Which would be like what? Stormcloud, right?
Stormcloud.
yeah.
JR with a thank you super chat. Thank you, JR. And you're welcome.
It would be
Lady
nice.
Lil says, happy to see a live stream. Given the scene at Storm's End, we see how the dragons fight against Control. Do you think it's possible the dragons will fight against the Dragon Horn? Victarion doesn't know Valyrian magic. Well, we don't know what that damn horn does. But I think you see more of a use for the horn now that we know that dragons are hard to control. So maybe the Valyrians weren't content with just the dragon bond and letting the dragon have some amount of say. They wanted to make the dragons slaves, and so they used the horns. Or more likely, the dragon horn was used in like creating the dragon bond or something like that. But it's a total, we don't know what those damn horns do. Tim, you have thoughts?
When it comes to the horn, like with Victarion, like I think Makoro is purposely keeping information. Like I don't think when he translates the glyphs, like I don't think he's translating all of them. And as for what the horn actually does, I think Euron is probably already aware of what it does and has probably already taken the necessary precautions and done whatever it is that needs to be done so that when Victarion does blow it or gets those thralls of his to blow it, that it's going to do what Euron wants it to do. Like I don't see Euron going in. Euron doesn't seem like the type to go into this blind, or at least not with an idea of what's going to happen. And I'm sure he knows his brother. He probably knows that Victarion's going to try and fuck him over if given the chance. So I do think Euron's taking the precautions and that Victarion's going to end up shooting himself in the foot when he gives the horn a toot.
So somebody commented on my new video with a cool brainwave. They said, okay, well, Euron is not a Targaryen. So perhaps in order to ride a dragon, he's got to do the thing that I was talking about. He's got to create a new dragon bond. So what if the horn is actually going to sacrifice Victarion somehow and stuff Victarion in the dragon so that Euron can ride it? That could be the way that the horn is involved in creating a dragon bond, and that could be the way that Euron is going to spring this trap on Victarion, which we all know he's going to do it somehow. But people are thinking too literally, like, oh, Euron's going to warg the Dusty Woman. Like, no, I don't think so. He can use a glass candle to spy on Victarion. He doesn't need to warg anybody, and he's not a skin changer that we know of, although you kind of never know with Euron. But there's the whole Bloodraven failed pupil theory and all that stuff. So point is, this is a pretty good idea about how the tables could be turned, is that Victarion's going to be a sacrifice so that Euron can have a real dragon bond with the dragon, which he wouldn't be able to do otherwise, according to this theory about lineages and dragon bonding and stuff. So, yes, Tim.
Okay, so
you in the back. Tim, I believe it is.
Okay, so Euron isn't Valyrian, that's true, but he has claimed to have gone to Asshai, like from Ib to Asshai, when men see my sails, they pray. And that brought me onto an idea of the dragon bond, and again, like with the Shadowbinders and the Asshai histories, like we have our two dragon myths that the Valyrians found. The Valyrians found them in the 14 Flames, that they were originally shepherds. But then there's also the other dragon origin myth, which is that the dragons aren't from Valyria, but originally came from the Shadow. That a people that, according to the Asshai histories, a people so ancient they have no name, brought dragons from the Shadow with them to Valyria, and then taught the Valyrians how to ride dragons. And then that was making me think more about this dragon bond and Aemon losing control. That and the Viserys' line about the idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. if the Targaryens do not have perfect control of their dragons like they claim to, and then by extension, that means that the Valyrians might not have had complete control of their dragons. Maybe it's because it was never their power to begin with. If they were taught how to ride dragons by another group of people, these people from the Shadow, from the Great Empire of the Dawn, then that could be the reason why the dragon bond isn't 100% perfect. And it makes me think, like, too, because maybe it's just me, and one of the things that I love is seeing seeing people getting, well, not people, seeing like the egotistical get knocked down off their pedestal, because the Targaryens have seen themselves for so long as like gods among men, and like they took advantage of the first night up until King Jaehaerys and Good Queen Aly put an end to it. But then, even though they ended the practice of the first night, which is how we got like so many dragon seeds, even though Jaehaerys puts a stop to that, he does still create this doctrine of exceptionalism, which still kind of puts the Targaryens on their own pedestal, as separate from other men, why they don't have to follow the faith, why they can practice incest, and yada, yada, yada. So the idea that maybe the Targaryens don't truly have complete control over the dragons is like, again, it's this illusion. And it goes back to the other things I say along these streams, how Rhaegar and now Viserys, how they always want to be the hero of their own story, how they're always believing that the prophecy is about me, or if it's not about me, it's my son, that I somehow have a part to play in all this. And it's these illusions of grandeur. And maybe the Targaryens and the Valyrians as a whole always had these illusions of grandeur, and it could always be to something that was never actually theirs to begin with, something that as the millennia have gone by, they've just convinced themselves is their power, when really it came from someone else.
Well, so since we've cracked open Asshai and the Great Empire of the Dawn, the potential connection, so when it says that people from Asshai taught the Valyrians how to bond with dragons, what we should think of is genetically created the Valyrians to be able to bond with dragons. So it's very likely that the connection between the Amethyst Empress and the Great Empire of the Dawn people and the Valyrians is that the Valyrians probably are an altered race from the Great Empire of the Dawn, that essentially they were created to bond with dragons. Then when the Great Empire of the Dawn collapses, some of those Valyrians either went to the 14 Flames or were already there probably, and formed their own nation of Valyria. So that passage that you just read also makes me think about the whole shadow binding aspect of stuffing ghosts into dragons to create the dragon bond. Men from the shadow maybe first brought dragons to Valyria. So that's suggesting that, like, yeah, if shadow binding was a part of creating the dragon bond, well, it's like, yeah, that kind of almost is implied by saying men from the shadow taught them how to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we can think of possibly Valyria, like in the way that the Valyrians made their own like sort of laboratory on Sithorios with, I think it was Golgassos, with the flesh in the charnel pits, and like creating these chimeras and breeding slave women with beasts. Maybe the Valyrians themselves, like maybe the 14 Flames was this first sort of lab, this petri dish that the Great Empire of the Dawn was using to, like, okay, we created this creature, now we got to create the person to bond with it to make like this super weapon.
Makes perfect sense.
Because before that, the idea is that the Valyrians originally were shepherds, that these were just people living among these volcanic mountains, just herding their goats and their sheep. Like back when, like that Giscari, forgetting his name, but like back when, like we were running this empire back when you were still fucking sheep. Like that's the line they drop about the Valyrians.
So, comment in the chat. This is also a comment I got on the video. Cannibal. Could be that the reason why nobody could bond with Cannibal is because he's not of the Targaryen dragon lineage. And that's why when he's talked about that he might have been there before the Targaryens came to Dragonstone, that squares with that because the Valyrians were on Dragonstone for 100 years or more before the Targaryens migrated there. So Cannibal would be of a different lineage. He would not be a Targaryen dragon, and that is potentially why nobody could bond with him. So potentially this theory explains a few things. And I'm not 1,000% sold on it because we don't have enough to be really certain of anything. But
it's fun.
It's pretty fun. Yeah,
sense.
it's pretty fun.
And it makes sense.
So.
We're not hurting nobody.
Well, I'm glad you like it, Nettles. That
Well, it's definitely supposed to be murky for when later on when we get a certain skinny brown dragon and a certain skinny brown girl, and how she exactly bonds with her dragon. Is it Valyrian ancestry? Is it something more ancient? Is it sorcery like Rhaenyra will later imply, or is it simple like Pavlovian conditioning?
Right, like you bring an animal food and you become its friend. I like, and I'll give this to you, Nettles, obviously, since you're Nettles. But I like all the possibilities, really. I like the idea that Nettles just did it with food and taming. Like, even if dragons are magical, you can still do it the classic way. That kind of makes sense to me. But I also like the idea that all this sacrificing of sheep was actually blood magic that she was doing to create a fresh dragon bond, especially that last scene with the black ram and the maester witnesses her covered in blood, still hopping right on the dragon. That just sounds like blood magic to me. So I've been wondering about that for a while. And perhaps, spoiler alert. Yeah, well, sorry. It's very out of context, so it's not a... I'll be quiet, though. Thank you, yes. Yeah.
Is it a spoiler?
But, so, well, we're talking about a future character, so I guess it is a little spoiler.
Hasn't been cast.
But it is very like, it's not really giving away the main plot of the story. So I'm gonna say it's okay, because I do want to ask you, Nettles, about the dragon bond specifically. How do you think Nettles bonded with Sheepstealer?
I mean, I don't know. It all depends. The reason that Fire and Blood left it open is because I think it all depends on what the writers of House of the Dragon, what story are they trying to tell? Are they trying to tell that, like, even a regular human can claim a dragon if they've got the brains? I know you said that you like the idea of her just, no Targaryen blood, just using her brains and the sheep to do it. I hate that. I hate the idea that someone like Littlefinger, like a non-magical person, a normie can do it, because I'm like, no.
True.
You gotta be born. You gotta be a child of destiny, man. You gotta have the famous parents or whatever. So far, my favorite is her being half Targaryen and half Child of the Forest, because it would finally bring the North and the old gods into this, because I've been waiting for my zombies. But she'd just be like we've been talking about, like a Blood Raven character, Daenerys, Jon, like that ice and fire person. But I think her story, if it were to go that way, it would be to show that she has ice and fire, but it's not her destiny to end it. Like, nothing, she doesn't do anything that we know of to the future storyline. So this great person with this great blood and these great abilities exists for what?
So I think as I'm listening to you talk, I think what makes sense to me is that, like, yeah, she has dragon blood, but just having dragon blood doesn't mean the dragon won't eat you, as we see.
Right.
So by bringing food, she's essentially giving herself a much better chance of being accepted by the dragon. So it's not just that she brought her food, but she did that so she wouldn't be eaten.
Yeah.
Because Sheepstealer is a vicious dragon, as is said. So that's I think the most logical deduction. But we shall see, and I will just be on the watch out for any sort of recreating the dragon bond or blood magic that might come up. We'll see if they go that direction. But let's go ahead and keep moving. What were we talking about? One of the dragons. Which one was that? I can't see the screen. Hang on.
We were on Meleys, and this is how we got. Then we
we're on Meleys.
Then we went on a field trip into the woods.
We talked about
sure did.
Dragonborn.
Grey Waste Tim.
This was a season 1 review.
It's
You guys.
this is not a season 1 review. What is this? I'm gonna have to.
Well, this is totally a season 1 review. Heck yeah. Meleys is in season 1.
Season 1 dragon review, maybe. We're really talking about the dragon. That's fine with me. We're gonna go 2 hours here on just dragons. I'll just rename it. We can do characters next week or something. I don't want to do a 4-hour stream, so that's fine. It's House of the Dragon, whatever.
But we have been dabbling in the characters that ride dragons. That's the thing. I mean, we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a different angle on the story. How about that?
Yeah.
So next we've got. Oh, speaking of dragon bonding, well, I guess we're already kind of. This is Vermithor, obviously. So Vermithor is the dragon of Jaehaerys, ridden by Jaehaerys for like 60 years. Vermithor will be claimed eventually. It seems it's you know, there's a character that's not yet introduced that's going to claim Vermithor in the books. We don't know if maybe they might change that. They keep flashing to Rhaena while Daemon is talking about Vermithor, so
Yeah.
it could be that there'll
They
be
could
a
do
change
anything.
there. But
Yeah.
I think mostly Vermithor is there for this scene. You know, the main thing to say about Vermithor, rather, for season 1 is this scene. So we've already been getting into it. But give me your thoughts, Tim, on the scene in general. Daemon singing to Vermithor. You can comment on my theory or just the scene in general.
Okay. Well, I said, like, this is his grandfather's dragon, so I do think that there's at least a certain degree of familiarity between the two of them. But considering that he has gone unclaimed since Jaehaerys' death, it's also been a 20-plus year gap. And we don't know how frequently people are visiting Vermithor, like how or what the I guess the dragon handlers on Dragonstone are doing with him. So I do think, like, this is for Daemon. This is probably sort of a reintroduction of sorts. Just be like, hey, do you remember me? You know, you're my granddad's dragon. Like, hopefully you'll remember, and then that can kind of coax Vermithor forward and kind of ease him into coming out of the caves, and then Daemon can maybe be like, okay, I'm not going to be the one to ride you, but I am going to kind of like smoothen this transition for when we do start trying to find new riders.
Very well said. I think that's exactly what is going on functionally. Nettles, looks like you agree too, yeah?
The only thing I got to say is that scene reminds me of Simba, remember who you are. Like, it's Daemon just being like, don't forget. Like, you're on our team, okay? You don't know no high towers. That's not your people's.
Well, so give me a little bit on just like, I mean, this is why we like Daemon as a character, despite all the bad things that he does. Like, he is a Renaissance man as far as Valyria goes. And of course, Valyria did a lot of bad shit too, so I guess it just goes with it maybe. But like singing songs in old Valyrian, Matt Smith's performance, the way he casually sings and drops his voice, Vermithor busts out with this huge jet of flame, and Daemon is just as steady as can be and just picks up singing, almost as if that was like Vermithor's part in the song. And Daemon's like, good job. All right, now it's my turn. I'll start singing again. And then, of course, Vermithor actually joins in with some weird little throat noises after the first growl. So he really is singing to Daemon. And this is just such a magical scene to me. I loved it. And I loved just Daemon incubating eggs and reading scrolls. Like I said, a Renaissance man. And I really love how they're playing up this angle of his character.
But do you think that the Dragon Keepers do what Daemon does, like, every day?
Do I think that the Dragon Keepers what?
To us, and like, it's special to us because he's Daemon. We know he's been reading his textbooks. But don't you think, like, the Dragon Keeper, or like in the pits, like, that's what they do to coax all the dragons in and out of places, or wake them up in the morning with a song, go to bed with a song?
That would be smart. They speak High Valyrian. We did see them using 10-foot poles though instead of songs, but
it was a new guy though. That was a new guy who was training.
Yeah, you know, I think Daemon is doing something more mystical here in the sense that he's
Yeah.
trying to reawaken the potential for bonding. And that's a little different from just coaxing the dragon to go this way or that. But Daemon does also need to be able to coax the dragon this way and that. And so this will probably help with that control as well. So, yeah.
You don't have to throw that devil's advocate in there. But.
Oh, no, well, I think Daemon is kind of acting like an OG Dragon Keeper. And the Dragon Keepers probably would know some of these songs. I don't disagree with you at all. Yeah. So. Yeah, the last, Elisa, yeah, correctly pointing out the last line of A Game of Thrones. The night came alive with the song of dragons for the first time in centuries. So this idea that dragons sing is definitely out there. And is not just poetic, as we can see. So let's see here. I do want to get through the super chats, obviously, before we wrap up the stream. So let me grab some of these. My favorite stream question: is there anything in the show that was unchanged from the books that you would have changed? It's hard to think of anything like that.
I can think of 100 things, but like I would have, I don't know. I would have kept Luke alive just to make it work, like just for sentimental reasons. Like I could change 100 things to make the dance not happen, or to save the characters that I love, or give them a few more good years. But that's not fun. And then I wouldn't be surprised. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think the one maybe after seeing how the show ended, I don't know why, but I kind of wish Daemon and Lena never got married. That we went straight from Rhea Royce to him being with Rhaenyra.
Yeah, that still ends up being a complaint about what they left out, though. You know, like they left out so much of Daemon and Lena's relationship that it seemed like, why even do it almost? Yeah, I get that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, like if I could just nitpick one thing, I'm just like, let's just not have that so that he can kind of have more time with Rhaenyra, I guess.
Yeah, so mostly I think most of the criticisms have to do with stuff that they left out because they set a pretty aggressive pace. That is mostly what people complain about. What they did was really good, and most people liked most of it, I would say. So, Little Tacky says, Tim, your glasses make it seem like you have blue eyes from the reflection. Very White Walker looking. Yeah, it does.
I'm taking advantage of the glare to make something of it.
Oh, you're doing it on purpose, you bastard. All right, let's see. What a dynamo. Egg says, I personally completely agree with Tim about Daemon, that in the book Daemon is described as equal parts light and dark, but in the show are mostly being shown the dark, barely any of the light. I kind of agree with that, but I also think that even in the books he's more dark than light. And that statement was always confusing for me because mostly he seems on the darker side of things. But I think that all this dragon stuff counts for like his positive side in the fact that like he's a Targaryen. He is expressing so many of the key things that make Targaryens. So that's important as well. And that is kind of a positive attribute mostly.
It's almost like Rickon. Like Rickon is more wolf than human. Like but kind of by the end of like the fifth book, it's like he spent more years in the wild with his wolf than he has like at court in his fancy castle.
Yeah. Well, I did see on like there was like a fan poll done. Now again, it's fan polls, so only put as much stock into these as you're willing to give. But they were ranking people's favorite character, and Daemon, even with the cut scenes and even with the changes they've made with him, like Daemon did win, and by like a very wide margin. Like he took, I think, like 44% of the vote. And now granted, this is split between like 10 characters. And then number 2 was Rhaenyra, and he was still like 20 percentage points ahead of her. So it's like Daemon's like way in the lead as far as fan polling is going as to who the fan favorite is. So even if they do, like, seeing that the fans are still responding positively to Daemon as a character does make me even more okay with them taking him into this darker route, because at least people can still see it and appreciate it and like it and just be like, yeah, but that's the reason we like him. We like him because he does all these bad things. Like, no, I don't think any Daemon fan would ever say like that he was a good person. It's like, no, we love him because he's a rogue. Like,
and honestly, the same goes for most of these characters. Like Viserys, we've all said, like, we not only do we love the portrayal, but we really sympathize with him many times this season, even while we've spent so much time criticizing his choices, not only for being like clueless, but very selfish and cowardly at times. So we've lobbed a lot of criticism at this character and still find him sympathetic and likable. So yeah, it's just, like I said, it's just before the stream, it's just this thing where like if somebody does something wrong, then people want to flush him out. Like any character that people want to like has to, I don't know. I don't even want to get lost in that whole conversation. But George was just, and Nettles, I'll give this to you. But yeah, George was just talking about how people don't really want gray characters. Like people still have a tendency to want these black and white heroes and villains. And that's just not how people are. Go ahead, Nettles.
No, I was just about to say, just a joke, that the reason that Daemon is #1 fan favorite is because that haircut. Those layers, like we never got over that short haircut that Daemon had mid-season. Like the fandom went crazy, especially all the new non-book reader people. They're like, oh, he's my favorite now. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of a good haircut.
Don't underestimate the charm of Matt Smith. There's just something about that man.
Oh, for sure. Too. And I also think that with gray characters, a lot of times people are rooting for them to do the right thing. And feel disappointed when they don't. Like, that's kind of how I look at Rhaenyra. I like a lot of things about Rhaenyra, but I can't help but criticize certain things too. So when I'm watching the show, I found myself essentially rooting for her to learn the politics, even while I'm criticizing the fact that she's not using her courtship as an opportunity to build alliances, for example.
Yeah.
In my heart, I'm wanting her to see her get it. And so in episode 10, when she's talking about, well, I shouldn't just plunge the realm into war because my real responsibility is to take care of people, not just sit my ass on the throne. You guys know I was cheering for that, even though that's very different than the character described in Fire and Blood, unreliable narrator, etc. Like,
yeah.
I was really cheering for that because it's a thought that needs to be expressed. And like I said, the way that they attempt to draw you into these gray characters is by getting you to root for them to do the right thing, you know, when they can, and cheering when they do, kind of. So, yeah. Don't choke your wife, Daemon. That's bad.
Unless you're in the bedroom. But yeah.
Yeah, context and consent.
Context is, yeah. Because there's been a lot of jokes. Like some people are like, oh, I would say, harder, daddy. I would like that. But I'm like, okay, everyone, we know that it doesn't count if you're not having sex. Like
there are so many people who are just like, I would tell them to choke me too. Like,
yeah, and of course that's just people having fun.
Yeah.
With, talking shit or whatever. Obviously, consent is everything with stuff like that. What now?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying the thing is also that Rhaenyra didn't look surprised or scared or that it was the first time. She's like, oh, he always does this on Thursday around 7 p.m. after 2 sherries. He always has to grab my neck when he gets a little angry. Like, it's kind of like, it was, not that I'm saying it's okay, just saying that it seemed normal for their relationship dynamic. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of that. Like,
well, this is kind of my thing is like, look, we all understand that domestic violence is wrong. Okay? Mm-hmm. Goes without saying. However, when you're talking about portraying a relationship between people like Daemon and Rhaenyra, it's not going to be like Alicent and Viserys. It's not going to be like yeah. Otto and his wife. Like, it needs to come across as like hot-blooded, that goes like good and bad. It goes both ways. Sometimes it goes off the rails. And like, that's the whole thing about Daemon is like his violence. Sometimes it's defending his family. Sometimes it's very selfish. Sometimes it's calculated. Sometimes it's very out of control. And that's the character. So like, hey, happy Halloween, Quinn's ideas. And also, congratulations, the newly wedded Quinn's ideas.
Yay! Congratulations, Quinn. Yay! I saw that. I was like, yay!
Yeah, I'm not just telling Quinn's business. He shared it on Twitter, so 4,000 people liked it. I saw, so everyone's happy for Quinn.
Yeah,
Congratulations, buddy. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so that's all I'm trying to say about Daemon and Rhaenyra is like, it's not supposed to be the ideal relationship, and you can still enjoy the romantic parts of it and understand that domestic violence is wrong. We're adults. Like, hopefully we got this idea by now, but yeah.
We'll see. People surprise me. Like, the reason I love the book, A Song of Ice and Fire as a whole, is because I feel like it is a perfect reflection of human nature. And though the years may change, human nature, I believe, doesn't change. So the same people that were living in the medieval times, same people living now, because we all had ancestors there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive now. It's repetition of genes, right?
Right.
And
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yes, that's what I mean. So, like, the impulses that Robert Baratheon and these people have are the same ones that we have. We're not perfect. What's surprising me is people saying, like, how come Rhaenyra didn't not have sex? Like, why didn't she just say celibate? It's like, bitch, would you do that? Because I know about you. I know how many partners you've had. I know how you get at the club. And you were saying, like, oh, how come she couldn't resist this? Or like, oh, why did Daemon do this? If you had a dragon, sir, I have seen you punched a hole through the wall, okay, because of a phone call you didn't like. If you had a dragon, you would burn down a city. So don't be talking to me about, oh, Daemon, how could he do this? Or shocked about all these things, when it's like, just look at a reflection of yourself. You're not perfect, so that's why these people aren't perfect. That's just how I see it. I feel like people aren't honest about who they are. Like, I'm talking about the people 2022.
Hold on. So look,
scream.
These Nettles, these are the same people that were like, Rhaenys should have burned all those people alive on that stage, including the High Septon. What was she thinking?
It's like, which is it? And you know what? It could be both, but just be honest about that. Be like, yes, I would have burned those motherfuckers down. And then be like, you know what? That's too hot-headed and I wouldn't have done that. And just be honest. Don't like, this is, it's almost like it's turning into like a morality stance, like showing, virtue signaling is like, I'm better than you because I would have showed restraint with my imaginary dragon. Like, it's like,
Nettles,
no.
Nettles, have you done Obsidian Nights with Gray Area in the past?
No.
I feel like you and her would get along great.
Yes.
Wait, have I done Obsidian Nights? I actually have done Obsidian Nights. For some reason, I thought you were talking about Direwolf City. Oh my gosh, I did.
Oh, no,
I did a Tyrion episode.
Me too.
Tyrion chapter. But yeah.
I have to go back and listen to that. I must have missed that one. I'm curious to see. I have the chemistry there too as well. But setting that aside, Jen Bledsoe says, isn't Rhaenyra a bit tamer than in the books? Wasn't Vaemond fed to her dragon? Yes and yes. But I think that all they're doing with that is essentially creating more of an arc where she can grow into that. Same as with Aemond. He doesn't need to be a hardened killer at 19. Give him some time to get there, kind of thing. So I think we all expected that, like, once Luke died, there's going to be a big change with Rhaenyra. We're definitely going to see that dragon come out because she does have it for sure. So yes, that is.
I was going to say, also keep in mind, it's been said 100 times, but it's like, remember in Game of Thrones how people were saying Daenerys is feeding people to her dragon, burning them up. This is stuff that Maesters are writing, for who they think is going to win, which is the High Towers. They're writing it skewing to the High Towers. So of course, if Rhaenyra's not doing enough mischief, they're going to add a few things there. So but some stuff is true. So you never know. That's why the show is so amazing, showing us like, okay, maybe the Vaemond thing was a lie then. Yeah,
and Elisa's pointing that out again. Of course, just we all know, but you have to keep repeating it. Fire and Blood is propaganda, and it's meant to be read as propaganda. It's not like a conspiracy theory that it's propaganda. Like, that's how it's written. That's the fun of it. So, just going back to these super chats, Trey says, Vhagar is so damn huge. Obviously, this came in earlier. Valyrian must have been like Rodan from Godzilla. So basically, Vhagar is said to have grown as large as Balerion by this time. So this is about how big Balerion is. And there's a lot of good Balerion art. There's a Field of Fire by Paul Ewell that I share a lot that shows Balerion's kind of true size. And yes, it's supposed to be monstrous, truly monstrous. Vhagar, but you could even get that with Caraxes in the Stepstones. You could see like just a different scale of beast. So, Sir Dreadhead says, why couldn't Laenor be an AV? What's an AV?
Laenor.
Oh, why couldn't he be? Well, he could, and we mentioned that, obviously. It's just that Adam's a great character by himself, so that's a pretty big replacement. But yeah, we can't get into the ins and outs. We'll do a spoiler stream at some point here, so we can get into the inner workings of stuff like that and speculate what they might do in Season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. Laenor was really excited, like the idea of going, because the Triarchy's still around, so it is possible that maybe Laenor and Carl just hop right back into the Stepstones War, and they just die in like some nameless skirmish during that. Like that's something they could easily do. So it's like
medieval times. You could die at any second, at any point of the day. Like, you could just die.
Like maybe it's not going to be happily ever after. It's happy until we get back into this war.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think they could do it like Seasmoke one day just starts crying out madly, and Daemon's kind of like, oh shit, Laenor must have died. And then they get word, I was trying to think of how can they tie it back into the plot. Like, does Lares find out and have him killed, or some weird thing like that? But you have to give me a minute to think about that a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense.
Laenor did allude to another Triarchy guy that we're gonna get when he said like a Tyroshi giant who dresses in women's frocks. So maybe in Season 2, if we get our purple pansexual pirate king, maybe he'll just have a run-in with him, and that's how it's handled.
Cinnabarb says Laenor becomes Ricalio Rindoon. Plot twist. Okay, I can't even.
So speaking of Larry's, can I give my weird take? I think I think Larry's is Team Black. The Clubfoot. And the reason is because in this season, because since this is a Season 1 discussion, we see him murder his father and brother, and him murdering his father and brother does not seem like something that would help out the Greens. This seems like something that would help out the Blacks, because it's just like in Season 1 of Game of Thrones, you get rid of the evidence. They killed all of Robert Baratheon's bastards, so you couldn't compare and say, look, but this one's hair and this one's hair. You couldn't compare anything to anyone because the Strongs are dead. So it seems like a move to help Rhaenyra more than the Greens.
Well, let's put it this way. Lares is building up a ton of leverage on Alicent that could be used and exploited in a variety of ways, I think is your point. So yeah. Tim, your thought?
I thought of that Mac line from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm playing both sides. That way I always end out on top.
It seems that way, but I just feel like, okay, especially like the feet thing, like that feet thing really freaked me out because I hate feet. But they're making him so evil. And whenever they're doing that, it's like, wait a minute, is there about to be a flip? Are you about to do an okie doke on the last season? And Larry says like, Rhaenyra, wait! I did this for you. I did this. I did this. I did this. I'm just calling it early. Like just reflecting on Season 1 and thinking about how are they going to try to trick me, and what is a character that I hate but I might love later on. And I was thinking it has to be Larry's.
I think Lares I think I agree with Tim that like he's just building up cachet so he can play it whichever side seems to be winning. So that would make sense that we might see him playing on both sides at different times, trying to say to Rhaenyra, look what I was actually on your side. Like, he could make that case a little bit. So, yeah. And, yeah. Okay, so next question here. J. Lord. In Valyria, the Targaryens are more akin Well, they weren't the top family in terms of wealth and power. I think the Starks and Lannisters of Valyria had other magical powers and real control of dragons, meaning the higher off families. Well, we can definitely have to speculate there, but one line that's important is that the Targaryen dragons were bred for war, so it kind of makes you think that that's what they did. It could be the answer of why they didn't bring dragon horns or the secret of making more Valyrian steel with them when they left Valyria. They may not have possessed that knowledge. So with so many families, it could be that the knowledge was fragmented among the different ones so that none of them became too powerful. That is definitely possible.
Yeah. Because if they have swords like Blackfire, Dark Sister, they were military guys. Because does House Valyrian have a Valyrian steel sword? It doesn't. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. It doesn't seem like. Just thinking about what families did in Valyria. Like the Valyrians, they were the shipmasters. They were like out here on these ships. That's what they did. But like you're saying, the Targaryens, they were probably who you called to around the painted table to command your troops.
Yeah, like it is said that the Targaryen dragons were bred for war. And Dave, like you've used the analogy of like the road building dragon in like the Great Empire. Like there would need to be a difference between a war dragon versus like a construction dragon, something with more of a laid back attitude. And maybe certain families just bred certain types of dragons, just in the way that people breed certain types of horses or certain types of dogs. Like this.
Well, for business.
Yeah, for business. Business, yes.
It's a family business. Whether you're building roads, maybe you're a taxi dragon company. Like, hey, we've got the best rates in town. We'll take you to your destination, like on the fastest dragon fleet. Like, you never know what they were doing. Oh man, now I'm too excited about Valyria. Like, imagining like the Disney version of them all with their little shops. Like, we burn things the best. Like, we fly. We do this.
If you think about this. Oh, sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
You have to go with this Valyrian family's road crew dragons. They're all union.
Yeah.
So if you think about this, and you believe that George has kind of long-term vision here about what he's doing with these TV shows, I do think it's like they're probably working their way back to Valyria. And at the very least, George is using things like the World of Ice and Fire and Blood to feed us Valyrian lore that's going to matter for the end of A Song of Ice and Fire. So these, the canon is different. They're making some plot changes, but I do think that George is like feeding us dragon lore in this show, playing up the importance of passing down the prophecy. It's for a reason. I do think it's going towards the direction of where the books will end. But let's see here. Dark Horse says Game of Thrones is just a sequel to Dragon Riders of Pern. A bunch of people have brought up Dragon Riders of Pern because they did something with putting ghosts into dragons. I haven't read it, so I don't know. Tim, do you know that one?
No, Nettles? I've not read it.
No?
No. I was about to ask, is that a show, but it's a book?
No, books. I think it's Anne McCaffrey, right?
Okay. Interesting.
I've definitely heard of it.
Yeah, so it's definitely one of George's influences. He's talked about it. Steve is asking who's the dragon and who's the rider in the three-head scenario. I'm not sure, Steve, if you want to clarify that question. I'm not sure what you meant by that. They're not specific. It's just the fact that there are three. But I feel like I'm missing the point of your question entirely. So, let's see. And then, Jack, we've come back to this a few times, but again, what were your favorite and least favorite interpretations, deviations, or alterations to the source material? So we've talked about some of these. Do you have a favorite change that they've made? Tim or Nettles, out of all the changes or elaborations, let's say.
I'm going to take it back old school. I like the change of Emma, her birthing scene and Viserys have it, because in the books it just says she died in childbirth. That's it. And in the show they showed you They took one sentence. She died in childbirth and turned it into she had many births before, and she told Viserys this is hard on her. This is gonna be the last one, and then Viserys has to choose. Well, he doesn't choose, but he has to give permission for the Maestress to cut her open to take the baby out. She's gonna die anyways. So that change, I think, was so much better for me because we all fell in love with Emma in one episode, and Emma is one of the most important characters in the books. I didn't give a fuck about Emma. You're just the first wife. Sorry.
She was like 2 sentences in the books. And although I do think there are some legitimate complaints about like lack of clarity as far as what they were trying to portray with the choice and all that, overall, I totally agree that like they did a great job of taking a character that was just not really present at all in the books and turning it into a very powerful character that all of us remember and who really shaped the show to come. So that was one of the things I was the most impressed with after seeing the first episode was what they did with Emma's character.
Yeah, and the shadow of her death, like Ned, looms over the entire season. It drives Viserys to do so much of what he does. His guilt, his love, all of that. Mm-hmm. Calling Alicent Emma, like Alicent never ever like the thing is we don't want to feel sorry for Alicent, but damn, do you know how hard it hurts, like whether you're attracted to the man you're married to or not, to like know that you're stepping into the role of the second wife and the first wife died and he will never love you like that. Like that is very hard to live for the rest of your life knowing you will never have fulfillment of finding an equal partner. That's a big deal. I'm so sorry. We get nose jobs, boob jobs. We change ourselves to find a partner. Finding a partner is a very big deal of the human experience. Like we can't just like downplay that. Alicent never experiences that because of how amazing of a woman Emma is.
That's a very good point. And just to segue to my favorite change, I think is Alicent as a whole. They did so much with her character. They made the character so much more interesting, dynamic. She's probably been the most debated character all season. And that just tells you they've created a compelling story here. And the way that they use Rhaenyra and Alicent as mirrors for each other, we've talked about it a lot, but it's really well done. And so I'd have to agree with Elisa Patience. Yeah, Alicent, the age change is kind of what facilitated that relationship. But yeah, everything about what they did fleshing out Alicent, I thought made a lot of things work. So, Tim, what was your favorite change? Or fleshing out,
Yeah. It would be the change with Aemon and Luke's dragon fight, that they don't have, that the dragon bond isn't 100% perfect. Not because I wanted Aemon to be fleshed out more, but because of like I had said before about, I guess my own love of Schadenfreude, just the idea that the dragon bond isn't perfect. Like anything that can punch a hole in the idea of the doctrine of exceptionalism is something that I like, and something that can kind of show like the Targaryens. Yeah, you're at the end of the day, like you're not gods. You're just men. You can be killed.
Oh,
men. You can
Tim,
be killed.
We're gonna do. You need to invite me on your channel. Well, you can do a separate stream about this, about the doctrine of exceptional, because they are gods. Bitch, if I'm special, I'm special. I'm not human. In the Marvel universe, they would have called the Targs mutants. You better put some respect on the Targ names. You're not going to do this, Tim. The doctrine of exceptionalism. Well, sorry, Dave. I'm sorry I had to start a gang war on your channel, but I had to call you out, Tim. We'll table this, but I definitely subscribe to the doctrine of exceptionalism.
Well, so look, this is the point of the Targaryens, kind of, is that as with everything, George wants to present all sides of something that he sees as imperfect and complex. So whatever the Targaryens represent, whether you want to, like, I often associate them with passion, wrath, lust, pride, ambition, a lot of different qualities like that, hubris. And those things can be good things. They can all go too far as well. And I think the Targaryen house is used to show all sides of that. So I don't think that George, because remember, the Targaryens aren't the Valyrians. Like, the Valyrians were slave lords. The Targaryens are not the Valyrians for a reason, because we are supposed to see Jaehaerys and Alysanne as pretty good rulers. We're supposed to see Maegor as Maegor the Cruel. So, yeah, I think that both your points are valid. Like, as modern humans that live in the modern world, we do know that all people are equal, and that's a very important truth that we've all internalized. In a fantasy world, the Targaryens are a little different. So George loves to sort of explore that complexity. And so I'm glad to have you both giving both sides of that, because they're both valid perspectives, I think, on the Targaryens.
Meet me at the playground, 3 p.m., Tim.
Well, are you bringing Sheep Stealer or not? Because he needs to know if he's going to bring his skeleton dragon or whatever he's got there.
Let me teach you about gods and men. Heck yeah, I'm bringing Sheep Stealer. I'll teach you about gods and men. No,
Yeah,
just
I'll be waiting for you out by the flagpole.
Well, there you go. So this has been a good stream. I'm going to have to rename this like
Did you do all the dragons?
Dragon Review. Yeah, I got through all the ones.
Dragon 101.
Well, there was
Dragon
like
Masterclass.
I guess I forgot to put Arax on there. Vermax we saw only briefly. I think I do have a Vermax picture. Let me see.
Baby dragon.
No, I forgot to put it on there. But yeah, Vermax, we saw him in the in the little dragon training school scene, which was fun. I like that. He's a cute little dragon. We should talk more about Arax though.
Caraxes is
Okay.
the most important one.
Yeah, so go ahead, either one of you guys.
Arax gives me the personality of. Do you guys watch the Magic School Bus? Do you know the kid that says, "I should have stayed home today," with the glasses?
Yeah.
Well,
I know
that's
exactly.
Arax is. Because he's just kind of like cautious. But that kid, that nerd, if you remember him, there were certain episodes where his fire would come out once you push him enough, or there were episodes where he would be brave, volunteer, go and save someone from being crushed by the bus. I don't know, whatever the episode was about. Them kids were always in danger. Listen, but Arax reminds me of that, just kind of cautious. But when it's exactly like Luke, he's kind of like, I don't want to be the Lord, but if you make me, fine, I'll put on the mantle, but reluctantly, and I'm gonna complain the whole way. But when you have that type of personality, like Cersei says, you win or you die. And we saw what happened with Arax. Can't have that. You can't have that I should have stayed home from school today attitude. Even the way that he was afraid to burn, like that first scene in the dragon school, like it seemed like he was like a little reluctant to Dracarys and had to be like, but that could have been a reflection on Luke. But both of them are a reflection of each other, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, well, one thing we can say for Arax and Luke is that was a dangerous mission. And they really showed you, like, flying a dragon in the rain looks pretty miserable. Finding your way to Storm's End through a storm looks pretty difficult. So just as Luke was, like, afraid but faced his fear, Arax was kind of doing that too. Like, he didn't panic. Like, Vhagar was strafing him and doing all kinds of madness. And Arax was hanging in there pretty tough, still obeying, flying straight, obeying the commands. Luke is like, quickly turn, and Arax is doing it. So put in a pretty good show for the fact that it was an unfair match to begin with. So rest in peace to Arax. I like the way Arax looked too. Really beautiful dragon.
My question for you guys, is there any universe, like maybe with you riding Arax, or is there any universe where Arax survives or even wins against Vhagar? Like that scene, is there any way that you could?
I mean, you're thinking maybe could they have hidden somewhere along the cove, but eventually you got to leave, So I don't know.
I think,
what do you think, man?
Like, if it wasn't for the storm, if it was clear skies, that Arax probably could have had the speed and the nimbleness to get away. But I also think, like, Luke was panicking and didn't think, like I think if Luke had more hindsight and probably maybe if he went back to Lord Baratheon, and he could have said something like okay, I can't marry your daughter. I know you got this marriage pact with Aemon. I can't marry your daughter. I'm already betrothed. But I do have 3 more brothers, none of whom are promised. Like, I think if Luke had instead of taking straight to Arax, especially after seeing that Vhagar was missing, if he had just been like, maybe if I go back inside, just take a couple minutes to think, maybe there is something I can offer him. And then that'll put him back on the table. And plus, it puts me back inside the house. I can maybe eat some salt, some bread, get that whole guest right thing, and then maybe stay the night, and then leave when the storm's over. And then then it becomes a question of how long would Aemon have waited him out?
Yeah, no, Tim. The way Baratheon made Luke leave, that was so dishonorable. Like that, I'm not even a man, and I felt like he took my manhood. He's like, "Go back to your mom, you pup." Like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't go back in there. Just on a pride thing. It's not smart, but like on a pride thing, I wouldn't go back in there.
Well, I think Tim raises a good point that like he could have appealed to guest right, like to stay there instead of being put out to leave, and also he could have thought to offer Joffrey or Aegon or Viserys, Daemon and Rhaenyra's 2 kids. I mentioned that in the video too, but
only the Lord can make betrothals, not a 9-year-old.
Well, but he could have suggested they should have empowered him.
Yeah,
we should have told him what to say.
Yeah,
it would have opened a dialogue.
Yeah, he literally came to hand over the letter. So like, I guess he never thought about like, well, what if they say no?
Yeah,
I don't think Rhaenyra thought about that too, and that's a question. Does that make Rhaenyra a good leader? She never, ever even had an inkling that Baratheon would say no. She 100% thought he would say yes, because she would never send her little boy out there if she thought there was 1% chance that Baratheon would say no.
Yeah, no, I think it's an assumption by her. That's how it's presented in the books as well. So yeah.
Yeah, you got to think everyone's your enemy. I'm sorry. Littlefinger was right on that. You got to look at all sides of the outcome, but shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Mara Lee says happy Halloween, so happy Halloween, Mara. Egg says, I really like how they handled Alicent at first, but then towards the end I feel like she was inconsistent with how she acted in previous episodes. I see that there was a little back and forth about whether or not she wanted to do the coup. So I get that criticism. I think the acting carried some of those scenes where it was a little back and forth. But what I did like is the idea that essentially she was deceiving herself about how much violence was going to be necessary. She didn't think about where it was going to go if they really did try to put Aegon on the throne. So it's believable to me that she was surprised. Like, what do you mean we're going to put everyone to death? And Otto's like, well, of course we are. It's the only thing to do. And she's like, what? So like that made sense to me to have that dynamic.
It's like we put the Strongs to death and you knew about it, remember? Death happens. I don't know. We'll see.
Sorry guys, I'm having some serious voice problems today.
It's okay. Thank you for muting, because then we can't hear.
No, I've been low on sleep for a bit, and I've been I need to do some therapy or something. Some vocal rehabilitation. I've been recording also like 3 times a week as well. Streaming and recording.
Rest time. Vocal rest.
I'm definitely going to take a vacation here in the next week or 2. So let's see. Is Nettles, you are stunning, says Javier. And Brennan says, do you think there's anything that happened in the series that changed George's view on the main series? Like putting the prophecy on the dagger. Well, George has already, like I said, shown us that Valyrians inscribed things into Valyrian steel, both on Dragonbinder and on Euron's armor has glyphs incised into its Valyrian steel. And this, I pointed out that George is inspired by Elric, who's got a black sword called Stormbringer instead of Lightbringer. And it's a black sword with red runes that light up when the sword lights on fire. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are etchings into either Blackfire or Dark Sister that George could sort of retcon if he wants to. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
I'm sure. I wonder if all of Valyrian steel, like if you sacrifice the right maiden under the right blood moon and dip the sword in it, if you might see a different story written in every piece of Valyrian steel. Wouldn't that be crazy? But it's just that you would never pay the price to be able to see it.
Javier says my cold hands costume is fire. Is this like a nimble dick is cold hands theory or what? I don't. Yeah, I wish you could smoke weed with. Sometimes we'll do a mythical astronomy world tour one of these days, so I can.
Yeah, Dave. Would you ever do a meetup, sell tickets and stuff at an event, and do like a?
I wouldn't sell tickets, but I would have a meetup for free. Yeah, for sure.
Like a smoke out. One of the most epic parties I ever threw in college was a smoke out. 50 people in a room sitting in a circle, lit 10 blunts at once, going around the room.
I hope it goes without saying that any sort of meetup I would do would be a smoke out. So.
But like it was like planned, it was like perfect, and it was like a moment where you're like looking around the circle in harmony. The best vibes. Everybody was on the same wavelength. To do that with weed and a song of Ice and Fire, oh shoot.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in Sacramento right now, so like I could do a Bay Area thing, but yeah, I need to do a tour for sure. We'll get there. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call it so I can get some rest. And yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks for sending in super chats. And yeah, so live streams will be every Sunday. I'm not sure. Some of them will have guests, some of them not. We'll see. But these two will definitely be back quite often. So we will see you again soon. And remind everyone what your channels are, of course.
Yeah, thank you guys for rocking with us this whole season. You guys are amazing. Thank you for accepting me. I'm a weirdo on here and stuff. You guys make me feel welcome and make this like so much fun. Best part of the week. So just want to say thank you for that. I do have like a YouTube channel and I'm pretty active on Twitter. So if you want to communicate with me on there, come on over to the crazy train. No babies because I'm harsh and mean, but yeah.
And then you can find me on YouTube, Gray Waste Tim. You can also follow me on Twitter at the Gray Waste. My YouTube's mostly I do a lot of deep dives on Lovecraft and A Song of Ice and Fire and George's other influences. My next stream that I'm planning, I don't have a date yet. I kind of do my stuff when I have time to do them, but I want to do the three emperors in ET and how I think George is kind of doing his own romance of the three kingdoms with that. And definitely if we get ET animated show, then I'm probably going to be a lot more active depending on what direction they take that in.
Well, that sounds cool, Tim. You know, the thing about, if I could just put it in a word for your sort of angle on the story, it may seem like these are very obscure sort of influences on A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's also thematic parallels that are going to carry over to the main characters. So even if it sounds like Tim is at first just explaining something about the Five Forts or the Grey Waste or whatever, all the stuff, he'll take the thematic parallels from these works that he's referencing, and you will be able to draw parallels to Euron and Dany and Jon and characters like that. So not only is it interesting, it's also more relevant to the main story than you might think at first. And it's also just fun to know like where George came from as far as his mindset.
Yeah, because George loves his parallels and his foils, and even something like the Three Emperors in ET, that and the situation of the Five Forts, it corresponds so well to the situation at the Wall and the War of the Five Kings. Like I've drawn many parallels on that, and that's actually one of the produced videos I want to do when I get my new computer system set up. Is what's going down at the Five Forts and comparing it to the Wall.
I'm here for that, Tim. And Nettles, did you say no babies because I'm harsh and mean? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, you're also funny and really nice too, just in fairness.
Okay, yeah, but yeah. I'm just saying, I made some enemies because of some Sansa takes. So I'm just saying, like, if you're going to come over here on my Twitter and start saying, well, you just don't get Sansa. I might tell you something about yourself. That's what I mean.
Well,
But
fair
no,
enough. But
yeah,
I think
it's
that's a good brand though. Like no babies, I'm harsh and mean. I think a lot of people go for that. So
leave me alone. But yeah.
leave me alone, but subscribe to my channel. Yep, that's
Subscribe to my
the YouTuber's dilemma right there. I feel
like
you.
and comment.
All right. Well, again, thank you two for being with me all season, and yeah, I feel like we've made a real partnership here, and it'll be fun to reconvene the panel throughout the next year and a half and talk about all kinds of stuff. We should do maybe next Sunday or the week after a character review stream since we mostly did dragons today, but yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, guys. All right, thank you, and I'll see you again soon.
Happy Halloween weekend.
Happy Halloween weekend. See ya.
Bye.